Mason Reed's hand froze on the fuselage panel. The hairline fracture running through the jet's primary load beam wasn't supposed to be there. In 40 minutes, billionaire Serena Vale would board this aircraft. In 41 minutes, 30,000 feet above Ohio, the wing would separate from the fuselage, and everyone inside would die screaming. He had two choices: keep his mouth shut and keep his job, or destroy his career to save the life of a woman who would never even know his name. If you want to see how a single decision can change two lives forever, stay with me until the end. And don't forget to hit like and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The airport smelled like diesel and burnt coffee at 4 in the morning. Mason Reed moved through the maintenance hangar like a ghost, his steel-toed boots barely making sound on the oil-stained concrete. Most mechanics worked with radios blaring and voices echoing off the corrugated walls, but Mason preferred silence. Silence let him hear the things other people missed: the whisper of a loose bolt, the sigh of pressurized air escaping where it shouldn't, the tiny mechanical prayers of aircraft begging someone to notice they were dying. He was 32 years old and invisible. That was exactly how he wanted it. "Reed," the shift supervisor's voice cut across the hangar. "Private jet on pad 7 needs a pre-flight. Owner wants wheels up by 6. Mason nodded without looking up from the turbine cowling he was inspecting. Carl Hennigan had been riding him hard for 3 months now, ever since Mason had flagged a fuel contamination issue that grounded a charter flight full of corporate executives. The passengers had been furious. The aircraft owner had been furious. Nobody cared that Mason had probably saved their lives. They only cared that he'd cost them time and money. "You hear me, Reed?" "Pad 7. Got it. And don't take all morning. This one's important." Everything was important at Riverside Regional. Every wealthy traveler expected their aircraft to be perfect, their schedule to be sacred, their mechanic to be grateful for the privilege of touching their expensive machines. Mason had learned not to expect thank yous. He just did the work and went home to Noah. Noah, 7 years old as of last Tuesday. Obsessed with dinosaurs and terrified of thunderstorms and unable to sleep without the glow-in-the-dark stars, Mason had stuck to his bedroom ceiling 3 years ago. The kid who made everything else in Mason's life make sense. Mason grabbed his inspection kit and headed across the tarmac. February wind cut through his coveralls, carrying the chemical smell of de-icing fluid from the commercial terminal half a mile away. Pad 7 sat at the far edge of the executive aviation section, isolated from the regular traffic. The jet waiting there was a Gulfstream G65O, gleaming white with subtle gold accents along the fuselage. $65 million of aviation engineering. Mason ran his hands along the hull, feeling for temperature variations that might indicate internal stress. The pre-dawn cold made everything contract slightly, which sometimes revealed problems that disappeared in warmer daylight. He'd learned that trick from a mentor who'd been dead for 8 years now, a man who'd taught him that aircraft didn't lie. They just spoke a language most people never learned. The exterior inspection took 20 minutes. Landing gear looked solid. Control surfaces moved smoothly. Fluid levels were good. Engine cowling showed no signs of stress or unusual wear. Mason pulled out his tablet and started logging each checkpoint, his fingers clumsy in the cold. Carl wanted documentation on every inspection now, ever since the fuel contamination incident. "Cover your ass," the supervisor had said. "If something goes wrong, I want proof you did your job." Mason climbed the air stairs into the cabin. Leather seats the color of champagne, glossy wood paneling, carpet so thick his boots left temporary impressions, a fully stocked bar along one bulkhead, crystal glasses arranged like soldiers awaiting orders. This was the kind of aircraft that spent more time sitting in hangars than actually flying, because the people who owned machines like this had 6 others just like it scattered across the continent. He moved through the cabin toward the cockpit, checking overhead panels and emergency equipment. Everything looked pristine, almost too pristine. Mason had seen enough private jets to know that the ones kept in perfect cosmetic condition were sometimes the ones with hidden problems, owners who cared more about appearance than substance, maintenance crews who detailed and polished but didn't actually inspect. The cockpit was empty. Mason settled into the left seat and pulled up the maintenance logs on the aircraft's computer system. The Gulfstream had been built 18 months ago. Total flight time, 73 hours. Most of those hours concentrated in the first 6 months, then almost nothing for the past year. That bothered him. Aircraft needed to fly. Letting them sit invited corrosion, seal degradation, all kinds of invisible decay. He scrolled through the maintenance history. Routine inspections every month, always signed off by the same technician. Nothing ever flagged, nothing ever wrong. That bothered him too. Every aircraft had quirks and minor issues. Finding nothing wasn't reassuring. It was suspicious. Mason climbed back out to the tarmac and moved to the wing root joint. This was where the wing attached to the fuselage, where all the aerodynamic forces concentrated during flight. It was also where manufacturers sometimes cut corners or where fatigue could develop faster than anyone expected. He pulled a flashlight from his kit and got down on his knees, angling the beam into the narrow inspection gap between wing and body. At first he saw nothing unusual, rivets in neat rows, sealant properly applied, the smooth curve of internal structure barely visible through the access gap. Then the light caught something that made his stomach drop. A shadow, a line, a crack. Mason shifted the angle of his flashlight, praying he was wrong. The line remained. Hairline fracture running perpendicular to the primary load beam, right where maximum stress would concentrate during takeoff and climb. He'd seen this kind of failure before, years ago, in a training scenario that had ended with a catastrophic in-flight separation. His hands were shaking. He pulled out his phone and took 6 photos from different angles, then grabbed the tablet and started documenting everything with clinical precision. Time of discovery. Location. Estimated length of fracture. Probable cause. Recommended action. The recommended action was simple. Ground the aircraft immediately. Do not fly under any circumstances. Begin comprehensive structural inspection before this jet ever left the ground again. Mason heard voices approaching across the tarmac. He stood up, brushing dirt from his knees, and found himself facing 3 people. Carl Hennigan, looking annoyed, a tall man in an expensive suit looking impatient, and a woman who made the Gulfstream look cheap by comparison. She was maybe 30, dark hair pulled back in a way that probably cost more than Mason's monthly rent, wearing a charcoal coat that hung on her frame like it had been designed specifically for her body, which it probably had. Her face was striking but severe, the kind of beauty that wasn't interested in being approachable. She looked at Mason the way someone might look at a vending machine that was taking too long to deliver their purchase. "Problem?" the woman said. Not a question, really. More of an accusation. Mason glanced at Carl, who gave him a warning look that said, "Whatever you're about to say, think very carefully." "Structural issue with the wing root joint," Mason said, keeping his voice level. "Hairline fracture on the primary load beam. Aircraft is not safe to fly." The man in the suit made an annoyed sound. "We're scheduled for departure in 30 minutes. Ching. Then you're scheduled to die about 45 minutes after that," Mason said. "The fracture will propagate under flight stress. Wing separation is likely during climb or high-altitude cruise. Nobody walks away from that." The woman stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "Do you know who I am?" Mason met her gaze. "No, ma'am." "Serena Vale, this is my aircraft." "And you're telling me I can't fly because you found a crack?" "I'm telling you if you fly, you'll die." I have engineers who inspect this aircraft regularly, certified professionals. None of them have ever mentioned any cracks. "Then they weren't looking in the right place," Mason said. He held out his tablet. Photos are time-stamped and geotagged. Fracture is approximately 4 inches long, located on the starboard wing root, frame station 437. If you want a second opinion, call your engineers now. But nobody boards this aircraft until that structure is verified. Carl's face had gone red. "Reed, maybe we should—" "Nobody boards this aircraft," Mason repeated. Serena Vale looked at him like he was something she'd scraped off her shoe. "Do you understand what you're doing? Do you have any idea how many people are waiting for me in New York? How many deals I have scheduled today?" "I don't care about your schedule. I care that you don't die screaming when this wing tears off." The words came out harder than Mason intended. He saw Carl flinch. The man in the suit looked genuinely offended, like Mason had violated some sacred rule about how mechanics were supposed to talk to billionaires. Serena's expression didn't change. "Carl, who is this person?" "Mason Reed, ma'am. One of our night shift mechanics, very thorough, but sometimes he's a little too— Get someone competent out here. Now." "Yes, ma'am. Reed, back to the hangar. I'll handle this." Mason didn't move. "Aircraft is grounded. That's non-negotiable." You're done here, Carl said. Get back inside before I write you up for insubordination. Write me up for saving her life? Mason looked at Serena. You want to ignore this? That's your choice. But I'm documenting everything. When investigators pull the wreckage out of whatever field you crash in, they'll find my report. They'll know someone warned you. They'll know you decided your schedule was more important than basic physics. Something flickered in Serena's eyes. Not fear exactly, more like calculation. She was used to people trying to manipulate her, trying to leverage her into decisions. But Mason wasn't manipulating. He was just stating facts with the emotional investment of someone reading a grocery list. Show me, she said. Carl started to protest. Serena silenced him with a look that could have frozen the sun. Mason led her to the wing root joint and pointed his flashlight into the gap. There, running perpendicular to the beam. You'll need better equipment to see how deep it goes, but surface propagation is already visible. Serena got down on her knees without hesitation, designer coat dragging on the oil-stained tarmac. She leaned in close, following the line of Mason's flashlight beam. For almost 30 seconds, she was silent. Then she stood up, brushing her hands on her coat like the dirt didn't matter. Call your engineers, she said to the man in the suit. Get them here immediately. I want a full structural inspection completed today. Ms. Vale, your schedule will be rearranged. I'll take the commercial flight to New York. Contact the office and reschedule everything for this afternoon. The man looked like he wanted to argue. Machine. The man, but apparently knew better. He pulled out his phone and walked away, already talking rapidly. Serena turned back to Mason. What's your name? Mason Reed. How long have you worked here? 3 years. Where did you learn to inspect aircraft? Yeah. Mason hesitated. This was the question he never wanted to answer. The question that opened doors to conversations about the past he'd spent years trying to bury. Military. Aviation maintenance specialist. Which branch? Air Force. Rank? Senior Master Sergeant. Ma'am, if that's all, how long? 12 years. Serena studied him with uncomfortable intensity. You don't look old enough to have 12 years of military service and 3 years here. I'm 32, which means you enlisted at 18 and separated at 30. Unusual. Most career military don't leave at 30. What happened? Mason felt Carl's eyes on him. Mason felt the question pressing against all the walls he'd built around his history. Personal reasons. Ma'am, I need to complete my shift inspection reports. What personal reasons? That's none of your business. Carl made a strangled sound. The man in the suit, who'd finished his phone call and returned, looked like Mason had just slapped a nun. But Serena almost smiled. Almost. Fair enough. Thank you for finding the crack, Mr. Reed. If it's as serious as you say, you probably saved my life. Probably saved several lives. Aircraft was scheduled to carry 4 passengers and 2 crew. Even better. She glanced at Carl. I assume you'll be giving Mr. Reed a raise for this? Carl's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. We'll, certainly recognize his diligence in our next performance review cycle. I'll follow up on that personally, Serena said, in a tone that suggested Carl should be very worried about that follow-up. She looked back at Mason. Are there other aircraft here you inspect regularly? 6 private jets, 2 charter turboprops, various small aircraft. Whatever needs pre-flight or maintenance, key. I want you to inspect my entire fleet. 4 aircraft currently based at airports within 3 states. I'll arrange access and appropriate compensation. Carl, make sure Mr. Reed is available starting tomorrow. Ms. Vale, I don't think our contract terms allow for... I'm not asking about contract terms. I'm telling you what's going to happen. Serena pulled out her phone and made a call. David, it's me. Contract revision for Riverside Regional Airport. Add a consulting clause for dedicated inspection services, mechanic to be specified by name. Rush it through today. She hung up and turned to Carl. You'll receive the paperwork by noon, Mr. And turned. Reed will be compensated at consultant rates, billed directly to my company. No impact on your operations budget. Yeesh. Carl nodded slowly, clearly trying to figure out if he'd just lost control of the situation or if this was somehow good for him. Serena looked at Mason one more time. I'll see you tomorrow, Mr. Reed, and thank you. She walked away across the tarmac, the man in the suit trailing behind her like a confused shadow. Carl waited until they were out of earshot, then grabbed Mason's arm. "What the hell was that?" "She asked me to inspect her aircraft." "You know who that woman is?" "Serena Vale. Vale Technologies. $30 billion company. She eats people like us for breakfast." "Then she should appreciate that I'm keeping her alive to eat breakfast." "Don't be a smartass. This could be huge for us, or a disaster. If you mess this up, I won't mess it up. I'll inspect the aircraft properly, document everything, and provide accurate reports. Same thing I always do." Carl released his arm. "I don't get you, Reed. Most guys would be excited about this. Rich woman wants to hire them personally, probably going to pay double what you make here. But you look like she just asked you to clean septic tanks." "I don't like complications. Money isn't a complication. Money is the solution to complications." Date. Mason thought about Noah, about the rhythm they'd built over 3 years. School and homework and dinosaur books and Saturday morning cartoons. The quiet life he'd constructed precisely because it wasn't complicated. Because it was predictable and safe, and nobody ever asked questions about his past. "I need to finish my shift," Mason said. Carl waved him off. "Yeah, go. Write up that inspection report. Make it detailed. If that jet really does have a crack, corporate is going to want documentation for insurance." Mason walked back to the hangar, his tablet heavy in his hands. The report took 90 minutes to complete properly. He included every photo, every measurement, every technical specification that might be relevant to the failure analysis. When he was finished, he uploaded it to the maintenance system and sent a copy to Carl's email. His shift ended at 6. Mason changed out of his coveralls in the locker room, washing the oil and grime from his hands with industrial soap that never quite worked. His reflection in the cloudy mirror showed a man who looked older than 32. Short dark hair starting to gray at the temples. Lines around his eyes from squinting at fine mechanical tolerances. A face that had forgotten how to look relaxed. The drive home took 12 minutes. Mason lived in a rental house on Culver Street, a neighborhood where every house looked similar and every yard needed more work than the landlords ever provided. His truck made a rattling sound he kept meaning to fix but never found time for. The driveway had a crack running through it that collected ice in winter. The front door stuck slightly because the frame had warped. It was perfect. Inside, Mason found Martha Kowalski sitting on his couch watching morning news, her knitting spread across her lap. She was 68 and lived 2 houses down and had been watching Noah every morning for 3 years. She refused to accept more than $50 a week, which Mason supplemented by fixing everything in her house that broke. "Morning, Martha. Coffee's fresh if you want some. Noah's still sleeping. Had a rough night last time. Heard thunder and got scared. I told him it was just weather, nothing to worry about, but you know how he gets." Mason poured coffee and stood in the kitchen doorway where he could see down the short hallway to Noah's room. The door was half open, revealing a slice of space shuttle wallpaper and the corner of a bookshelf overflowing with library books about dinosaurs and space and how things worked. "He asked about his mother?" Martha's knitting needles paused. "No, but he drew another picture, left it on the kitchen table." Mason found the drawing. Crayon on construction paper. 3 figures. A tall man, a small boy, and a woman with long yellow hair. The man and boy were holding hands. The woman stood slightly apart, her features vague and undefined. Noah drew this same picture maybe once a month with small variations. Sometimes the woman was smiling. Sometimes she had no face at all. Sometimes she wasn't in the picture. "I don't know what to tell him," Mason said quietly. "You tell him the truth, that his mother had problems you couldn't fix, that she left because of those problems, not because of him, that you love him enough for 2 parents. Is that enough?" "Has to be. It's what you've got." Mason set the drawing on the refrigerator next to a dozen others. Noah's artistic chronicle of a family that existed only in memory and imagination. A family. Mason had tried so hard to build and keep together before everything fell apart in ways he still couldn't fully explain to himself, let alone to a 7-year-old. Martha gathered her knitting. "I'll see you tomorrow morning?" "Yeah, same time. Thank you, Martha." "Don't thank me. That boy's an angel. Easiest money I ever made." After she left, Mason stood in his kitchen drinking coffee and listening to his son breathe in the next room. This was the life he'd chosen. This quiet, simple, Unremarkable existence where nothing dramatic happened and nobody expected anything from him except showing up for work and being a decent father. He'd given up everything else for this. The career, the ambitions, the complicated machinery of military life that had defined him for over a decade. All of it gone, traded for this, for Noah. And most days that felt like the best decision he'd ever made. He finished his coffee and was rinsing the cup when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Mason almost ignored it, then remembered that Serena Vale had mentioned her fleet inspections. If this was about that, he probably needed to answer. This is Mason. Tracy, sorry. Mr. Reed, this is David Kemp. I'm Ms. Vale's chief of staff. She asked me to coordinate the aircraft inspection schedule with you. Do you have time to discuss logistics? I work nights. Days are for my son. Understood. We can arrange inspections during your normal shift hours if the aircraft are repositioned to Riverside Regional. Would that work? Mason thought about it. Having the jets brought to him made more sense than traveling to multiple airports. Yeah, that works. Excellent. First aircraft will arrive tonight around 11. Ms. Vale will be present for the inspection. Why? I'm sorry? Why does she need to be present? I inspect aircraft, write a report, send it to whoever needs it. Owner doesn't need to watch. Boris. There was a pause. Ms. Vale is very hands-on with matters of safety. Fine. 11 tonight. Anything else? Just your consulting fee. We're offering $5,000 per aircraft inspection, paid immediately upon completion of your report. Mason almost dropped his phone. $5,000. He made $38,000 a year at Riverside Regional. One inspection was almost 3 weeks of pay. That's too much, he said. I'm sorry? Pay me what the job's worth. $2,000 per inspection. Comprehensive report, documentation, photos, recommendations. $2,000. Another pause. Mr. Reed, I'm authorized to pay $5,000. And I'm telling you, $2,000 is fair. I'm not looking to get rich off this. Most people would simply accept the offered rate. I'm not most people. I'm beginning to understand that. Kemp actually laughed. All right, $2,000 per inspection. Ms. Vale will find this either refreshing or baffling. Probably both. We'll see you tonight at 11. Mason hung up and stared at his phone. $2,000. 4 aircraft meant $8,000. That was almost a quarter of his annual income. He could fix the truck, replace Noah's winter coat that was getting too small, put money aside for emergencies that always seemed to find him anyway. Or he could walk away from the whole thing, tell Serena Vale to find someone else, keep his life simple and uncomplicated. But standing in his kitchen with morning light coming through the window and Noah still sleeping down the hall, Mason knew he wasn't going to walk away. Not because of the money, because of the crack. Because somewhere in his bones he knew that crack shouldn't have been there, shouldn't have been missed by the regular inspections. And finding it had flipped some switch in his brain that he'd tried very hard to keep turned off for 3 years. The switch that said something was wrong. The switch that said someone needed to figure out why. The switch that had made him very good at his military job and very bad at walking away from problems that weren't technically his responsibility. Noah woke up at 7:30. Mason heard the shuffle of small feet on carpet. Then his son appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing dinosaur pajamas and holding a stuffed triceratops that had seen better days. Morning, buddy. Morning, Dad. Noah climbed into a kitchen chair. Are you tired? Always a little tired after work, but I'm okay. You hungry? Can we have pancakes? They made pancakes together. Mason cooked while Noah stood on a chair next to him, pouring chocolate chips into the batter with intense concentration. This was their Saturday morning ritual, even though today was Friday. Because Mason's work schedule meant weekends didn't exist in any conventional sense. His days off rotated based on shift patterns. Dad? Yeah? Why was Mommy's hair yellow? Mason flipped a pancake carefully. What do you mean? Yeah. In my picture, I made her hair yellow, but I don't remember what her hair really looked like. This was the conversation Mason had been dreading for 7 years. The conversation he'd tried to prepare for and still had no idea how to navigate. Because how did you explain to a 7-year-old that his mother had left when he was 6 months old? That she'd been dealing with things Mason didn't fully understand himself? That he'd come home from a long shift one day and found Noah crying in his crib and a note on the table that said, "I can't do this, I'm sorry"? Her hair was brown, Mason said quietly. Like mine. You colored it yellow because you were thinking of sunlight, probably. That's okay. Do you think she'll ever come back? I don't know. Buddy, do you want her to come back? Mason transferred pancakes to plates and set one in front of Noah. I want you to be happy. That's what matters. But do you want her to come back? The question hung in the air between them. Mason thought about all the answers he could give, the diplomatic ones, the careful ones that protected Noah from complicated truths. But his son was looking at him with those serious eyes that sometimes seemed too old for a 7-year-old face, and Mason found himself giving the honest answer instead. No, Mason said. I don't think I do. Noah nodded slowly, processing this. Then he stabbed a pancake with his fork and poured syrup over it with the confidence of someone who'd just solved a complicated problem. Okay, can we go to the library later? Yeah, after you finish your homework. They ate breakfast together. Mason washed dishes while Noah disappeared into his room and emerged with a math worksheet that needed completing. They sat at the kitchen table together, Mason helping with subtraction problems while fighting the exhaustion that always came after a night shift. His body wanted to sleep, but his brain never quite shut off during daylight hours. At 2 p.m, they drove to the library. Noah checked out 3 books about dinosaurs and 1 about how airplanes worked. The librarian smiled at Mason in a way that suggested she was interested in more than just checking out books, but Mason pretended not to notice. Relationships required energy and emotional bandwidth he didn't have. They required vulnerability and trust and willingness to let someone into the careful life he'd built. They required things Mason had given up when his wife walked out. Home by 3, Noah reading on the couch, while Mason tried to sleep for a few hours before his shift. But sleep never came properly. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about hairline cracks and structural integrity, and the way Serena Vale had looked at him like he was a puzzle she wanted to solve. He didn't want to be solved. He wanted to be left alone. At 9:30, he got up and made Noah dinner. At 10, he kissed his son goodnight and waited for Martha to arrive. At 10:40, he drove back to Riverside Regional Airport, the night air cold enough to burn his lungs. The Gulf Stream was waiting on Pad 7 with floodlights illuminating its hull. A mobile inspection rig had been positioned near the wing root, the kind of equipment that could do comprehensive structural analysis. Mason saw 3 men in coveralls working under the fuselage, and Serena Vale standing 20 feet away talking on her phone. She ended the call when she saw him approaching. Mr. Reed, punctual. You're paying me to be here. What did your engineers find? Everything you said. The crack is worse than what's visible on the surface. Internal propagation extends almost 8 inches. Stress analysis suggests the wing would have failed somewhere between 12 and 20 minutes into flight, depending on climb angle and turbulence. Mason nodded. This was exactly what he'd expected, but had hoped was wrong. They want to know how you spotted it, Serena continued. The lead engineer has 30 years of experience, and he walked right past that joint 3 times in the last 6 months. He wasn't looking for it. People see what they expect to see. Your aircraft is low hours and well-maintained, so he expected perfection. I expect nothing, so I check everything. Cynical approach. Effective approach. Methane. Serena studied him with that same uncomfortable intensity from this morning. My engineers want to hire you, offer you triple what you make here. Not interested. You didn't even ask what the salary is. Don't need to. I'm not interested. Why not? Because I have a life that works. I don't want a new one. Most people want better jobs, more money, career advancement. I'm not most people, Mason said, echoing what he'd told her assistant earlier. Are we inspecting an aircraft tonight or just standing here talking? For the first time, Serena looked genuinely surprised, like she'd encountered something that didn't fit her understanding of how the world operated. The aircraft I want you to inspect is in the hangar. Follow me. They walked across the tarmac together, not talking, which Mason appreciated. The hangar held a Citation X, sleek and fast, the kind of jet built for executives who needed to cross the country quickly. Mason began his inspection while Serena watched from a distance, taking calls and answering emails, but never actually leaving. The citation was clean, no cracks, no stress indicators, no hidden problems waiting to kill someone. Mason documented everything and handed Serena his preliminary report at 1 in the morning. Aircraft is airworthy. Full documentation will be uploaded to your maintenance system by end of shift. That's it? 2 hours of work for $2,000? If you want me to find problems that don't exist, I can do that. But I assumed you wanted the truth. I want to understand you. Why? Because you confuse me, and I don't like being confused. Mason picked up his inspection kit. I'm a mechanic who raises his kid and goes to work. Nothing confusing about that. You were Air Force, Senior Master Sergeant at 30. That's an unusual rank for that age. You either got promoted very fast or you were doing something most mechanics don't do. Oh, that was a long time ago. Not that long. 3 years is recent history. Ms. Vale, why did you leave? Mason met her eyes. Because I had a son who needed a father more than the Air Force needed another pair of hands. Is there anything else you need tonight? Serena opened her mouth like she had a dozen more questions, then seemed to think better of it. No, thank you for your work. The next aircraft will be here tomorrow night. Mason walked to his truck. His phone showed a text from Martha. Noah had another nightmare. Thunderstorms again. I stayed with him until he fell back asleep. He's okay now. Guilt hit Mason like a physical weight. He should have been there. Should have been the one comforting Noah. But he was here instead, inspecting aircraft for a billionaire who seemed determined to excavate his past for reasons he couldn't understand. The drive home felt longer than usual. Culver Street was dark except for streetlights that flickered and buzzed. Mason let himself inside quietly, checking on Noah before doing anything else. His son was asleep, the glow-in-the-dark stars casting faint greenish light across his face. The stuffed triceratops was tucked under one arm. Mason stood in the doorway watching Noah breathe. This was everything. This quiet room with its space shuttle wallpaper and dinosaur books and crayon drawings of incomplete families. This was the life he had chosen and fought to protect. And he had the terrible feeling that Serena Vale was about to complicate everything. The second aircraft arrived 3 nights later during a rainstorm that turned the tarmac into a mirror of lights and moving shadows. Mason watched the Bombardier Global 7500 taxi toward the executive terminal, water streaming off its wings. Serena Vale's largest jet, the one she used for international flights, worth $90 million if the aviation magazines were right. He'd spent the last 72 hours trying not to think about her, trying to maintain the careful separation between work and home that had kept his life functional for 3 years. But she kept showing up in his thoughts anyway. The way she'd looked at him like he was a problem requiring solution, the questions about his military service that had gotten uncomfortably close to territory he didn't discuss with anyone. Noah had asked about her over breakfast. Dad, who's the lady you're working for? Just someone who needs aircraft inspections. Is she nice? Mason had thought about that while pouring orange juice. Nice wasn't the right word for Serena Vale. She was direct, intelligent, unsettling. She looked at people the way Mason looked at aircraft, searching for cracks and weaknesses and hidden structural problems. She's professional, he'd finally said, which was true enough and safely vague. Now the Bombardier's engines were spooling down, and Mason was walking across wet concrete toward the jet, his inspection kit protected under his waterproof jacket. Carl had been thrilled about the consulting arrangement, mostly because it made the airport look good to have a mechanic personally retained by someone like Serena Vale. What Carl didn't know was that Mason would have preferred to never see her again. The aircraft door opened and stairs descended. Mason expected ground crew, maybe a pilot. Instead, Serena herself appeared in the doorway, wearing dark jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than Mason's truck. Her hair was down tonight, falling past her shoulders, making her look younger and somehow less armored than before. Mr. Reed, I was beginning to think you'd changed your mind. I'm on schedule. You said 11. It's 11. G-E. Most contractors would have arrived early, tried to impress me. I'm not trying to impress you. I'm trying to inspect your aircraft. She came down the stairs, not bothering with an umbrella despite the rain. Water darkened her hair and spotted her sweater, but she didn't seem to care. Mason found that oddly compelling, a billionaire who apparently didn't mind getting wet. I need to tell you something before you start, Serena said. My head of security ran a background check on you. Mason's jaw tightened. Did he? Don't look at me like that. I run background checks on everyone who works for me. It's standard procedure. I don't work for you. I'm a contractor doing aircraft inspections. Semantics. The point is, I know more about you now. Mason James Reed, born in Columbus, enlisted at 18. Aviation maintenance specialist assigned to special operations support. Deployed 4 times to locations that are still classified. Promoted to senior master sergeant at 28, which is extremely unusual. Received a commendation for extraordinary technical achievement, details redacted. Then at 30, you requested discharge under family hardship provisions. Separated honorably, and disappeared into small-town Ohio. Bus. Mason set his kit down on the wet concrete. You done? Not remotely. The interesting part is what's missing. Your wife's name appears in early records, Julia Reed, but she vanishes from all documentation around the time your son was born. No divorce filing, no death certificate, no forwarding address. Just gone. And you never mention her to anyone. The airport staff told my investigator they didn't even know you'd been married until they saw your emergency contact forms. Your investigator talks too much. He's thorough. That's why I pay him. And what exactly did you learn from all this digging? That I had a wife who left? That I raised my kid alone? Congratulations, you've discovered things I could have told you if you'd just asked. I'm asking now, what happened to Julia Reed? Mason picked up his kit. She left. End of story. Are we inspecting this aircraft or standing in the rain having a conversation that's none of your business? Both, apparently. But Serena moved toward the Bombardier's forward landing gear, conceding the point. I'll stay out of your way. She didn't stay out of his way. She followed him around the aircraft asking questions about every component he inspected, every measurement he took, every note he logged on his tablet. Most owners didn't care about the technical details. They just wanted to know if their expensive machine was safe to fly. But Serena wanted to understand everything. Why he checked rivet patterns in specific sequences, how he could tell the difference between normal wear and structural fatigue, what temperature variations meant when his hands moved across metal surfaces in the dark. You feel it, she said, the way you run your hands over the hull. You're not just looking, you're feeling for something. Temperature inconsistencies. Stress creates heat. Usually microscopic. But if you know what you're looking for, you can feel it. They teach that in the Air Force. They teach checklists and procedures. The rest you learn by paying attention. Mason climbed up to inspect the starboard engine nacelle. The rain had stopped, but everything was still wet, metal slick under his hands. Serena stood below watching him work, and he had the uncomfortable sensation of being studied like a specimen under glass. You don't like me, she said. Mason paused, his flashlight beam fixed on a perfectly normal turbine blade. I don't know you well enough to like or dislike you. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. Fair enough. Let me rephrase. You don't want to know me. You wish I'd go away and leave you alone. Mason climbed down from the nacelle. Ms. Vale, you hired me to inspect aircraft. I'm inspecting aircraft. My personal feelings about you or anyone else don't matter. They matter to me. I need to understand the people I work with. Why? I either find problems with your jets or I don't. My psychological profile doesn't change the inspection results. But it changes whether I trust those results. Serena stepped closer, close enough that Mason could see water droplets caught in her hair. You're not like other people I deal with. Everyone wants something from me. Money, connections, opportunities, access. But you act like this job is an inconvenience, like you'd rather be anywhere else. I would rather be home with my son. Then why take the job? Because you need someone to actually look at your aircraft, instead of just signing off on checklists. And because $2,000 pays for things my salary doesn't quite cover. I offered $5,000. $2,000 is fair. Serena shook her head slowly. You really don't care about money, do you? I care about having enough. Beyond that, it's just numbers. Mason moved to the port side landing gear, inspecting hydraulic lines and brake assemblies. Your aircraft is clean. No issues I can find. I'll do the interior inspection and flight systems check. Then you're good to go. When do you sleep? The question caught him off guard. What? You work all night inspecting aircraft. Then you go home to take care of a 7-year-old. When do you actually sleep? When I can. That's not sustainable. I've sustained it for 3 years. And you look exhausted. Mason straightened up, meeting her eyes. Ms. Vale, I appreciate your concern, but my sleep schedule is not your problem. Everything about you is interesting to me. Why? Because you saved my life and then acted like it didn't matter. Because you're clearly overqualified for this job but refuse anything better. Because you negotiate yourself down on payment and won't let anyone close enough to figure out why. Serena crossed her arms. You're a puzzle. I'm good at solving puzzles. I'm not a puzzle. I'm a mechanic with a kid and a shift schedule. Stop trying to make me complicated. You are complicated. You just work very hard to pretend you're not. Mason wanted to argue but didn't have the energy. He climbed the air stairs into the bombardier's cabin and began the interior inspection. Serena followed him inside but finally fell silent, apparently recognizing that she'd pushed as far as she could for one night. The inspection took 2 hours. Mason found nothing wrong, which either meant the aircraft was genuinely well maintained or Serena's regular inspectors were better at their jobs than the team who'd missed the Gulf Stream's crack. He completed his documentation at 1:30 in the morning and handed Serena the preliminary report. Aircraft is airworthy. Full report uploaded by end of shift, same as before. 2 more aircraft to go. I'm bringing both here next week. We can do them on consecutive nights if that works for your schedule. Fine. Mason. She used his first name deliberately, testing boundaries. Can I ask you something personal? You can ask. I might not answer. Why did you really leave the Air Force? Mason had known this question was coming eventually, had felt it building through every conversation, every loaded silence. He could deflect again, shut her down, maintain the walls he'd built around that part of his life. But standing in the dim cabin of her $90 million jet at 1:30 in the morning, tired enough that his defenses were crumbling, he found himself giving her something closer to truth. Because my son needed stability more than the military needed me. Because his mother left, and I was deploying every 6 months, and he was being raised by whoever I could find to watch him. Because one day I came home and he didn't recognize me at first, and I realized I was failing at the only thing that actually mattered. Serena's expression softened slightly. That must have been a difficult decision. It was the easiest decision I ever made. Everything after that has been living with the consequences. Do you regret it? No, I miss the work sometimes. I was good at what I did. But Noah's happy and healthy and doing well in school, and that's worth more than any career. Mason picked up his kit. I need to get home. My neighbor watches him when I work, but I don't like being gone longer than necessary. Wait. Serena pulled out her phone, typed something quickly. I just sent you an email. Job offer. Not for me, for a defense contractor in Columbus that maintains military aircraft. Same kind of work you did before, but civilian side. Better pay than what you make here. Day shift options. Comprehensive benefits. They owe me a favor. 1 word from me and the position is yours. Mason stared at her. Why would you do that? Because you're wasting your talent on pre-flight inspections. Because you clearly loved your military work and gave it up for reasons that no longer apply. Noah's older now, more independent. Because someone with your skills should be using them. I am using them. I inspect aircraft. You inspect private jets for rich people who mostly fly them twice a year. That's not the same as what you were doing before. It's what I chose. You chose it when Noah was a baby who needed constant attention. He's 7 now. The situation has changed. Mason felt anger stirring in his chest. Don't tell me what my son needs. You don't know him? You don't know us. You're right, I don't. But I know talent when I see it, and I know what it looks like when someone's punishing themselves unnecessarily. I'm not punishing myself. I'm being a father. Those 2 things aren't mutually exclusive. Serena's voice stayed level. Look, I'm not trying to insult you or tell you how to live your life. I'm offering an opportunity. Read the email. Think about it. If you're not interested, delete it, and we never discuss this again. Mason descended the air stairs without responding. The night air felt cold after the climate-controlled cabin. His truck waited across the tarmac, old and reliable and completely unimpressive. Exactly like everything else in his life. He drove home through empty streets, his mind churning. The job offer bothered him more than it should. Not because it was insulting, but because it was tempting. Because part of him missed the complexity of military maintenance work, the satisfaction of solving problems that actually mattered instead of checking oil levels and tire pressure on aircraft that rarely flew. But taking that job meant change, meant disrupting the careful routine he and Noah had built, meant opening doors he'd deliberately closed 3 years ago. Martha was asleep on his couch when he got home, late-night television playing quietly. Mason woke her gently and walked her back to her house, waiting until she was safely inside before returning to check on Noah. His son was awake, sitting up in bed with his stuffed triceratops, the glow-in-the-dark stars providing barely enough light to see by. "Hey, buddy, what are you doing up?" "Couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about thunder." Mason sat on the edge of Noah's bed. "There's no thunder tonight." "I know, but sometimes I think about it anyway, and then I can't stop thinking about it. You want me to sit with you for a while?" Noah nodded and scooted over, making room. Mason lay down beside his son, the bed too small for both of them, but neither caring. They stared up at the artificial stars together, the plastic constellations that bore no resemblance to actual astronomy, but provided comfort anyway. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "Why do people leave?" The question hit harder than Mason expected. "What do you mean?" "Like Mom. Why did she leave? Did we do something wrong?" "Us." Mason's chest tightened. "Nobody. You didn't do anything wrong. Neither did I. Sometimes people have problems that are too big for other people to fix. Your mom had problems like that." "It wasn't about you." "But she never came back." "No, she didn't." "Are you going to leave?" "Never. Not ever. You understand me? I'm not going anywhere." Noah was quiet for a moment. "Promise? Promise. You're stuck with me until you're old enough to move out on your own, and even then I'm probably going to embarrass you by calling too much." That got a small laugh. Noah shifted closer, his head resting against Mason's shoulder. "I'm glad you didn't die in the war." "Me too, buddy." "Were you scared when you were deployed?" Mason thought about how to answer that honestly. "Sometimes. But I was trained really well and I knew what I was doing, so mostly I just focused on my job." "What was your job?" "Keeping aircraft safe, making sure they worked properly so pilots could fly them." "Like what you do now?" "Similar, but more complicated." "Do you miss it?" The question echoed Serena's earlier comment. Mason realized his son was more perceptive than he usually gave him credit for. "Sometimes I miss it. But I like this better." "Why?" "Because I get to be with you. That's better than any job." Noah seemed satisfied with that answer. He fell asleep gradually, his breathing evening out. Mason stayed beside him for another 20 minutes, watching the fake stars and thinking about everything Serena had said, about wasted talent and unnecessary punishment and opportunities he was supposedly missing. But lying there in his son's too small bed, listening to Noah breathe, Mason couldn't imagine anywhere else he'd rather be. This was enough. This was everything. He eventually extracted himself and retreated to his own room, but sleep remained elusive. At 4 a.m, he opened Serena's email on his phone. The job description was impressive. Senior Aviation Systems Inspector for Meridian Defense Solutions. Day shift with weekend rotation. Salary almost double what he currently made. Full benefits including health insurance that actually covered things. Based in Columbus, less than 40 minutes from his house. The work itself read like a catalog of everything he'd been trained to do. Complex maintenance evaluation for tactical aircraft. Structural analysis and failure investigation. Technical consultation on aviation systems. It was exactly the kind of challenge that used to make him feel alive, back when his identity wasn't wrapped up entirely in being Noah's father. Mason closed the email without responding. He'd think about it later. Or never. Probably never. The next day was Saturday, which meant pancakes in the library. Noah was quieter than usual during breakfast, still processing their conversation from the middle of the night. Mason didn't push him to talk. Sometimes kids needed space to work through their thoughts. At the library, Noah found a book about aviation history. He carried it to the checkout desk with unusual seriousness, like he'd discovered something important. "This has pictures of military planes," Noah said in the truck on the way home. "Did you work on planes like these?" "Some of them. Technology's changed a lot, but yeah, similar aircraft." "Were you good at it?" "I was okay." "Dad?" Noah gave him a look that suggested he knew when he was being given a non-answer. "Were you good at it?" Mason sighed. "Yeah, I was good at it." "Then why did you stop?" "Because you needed me more than the Air Force did." "But I'm bigger now. I go to school and I have friends and I can microwave my own mac and cheese. I don't need you all the time anymore." Mason pulled into their driveway and killed the engine. "Buddy, where's this coming from? I don't want you to be sad because of me." "I'm not sad. You look sad sometimes when you think I'm not paying attention. And Martha said you gave up a lot to take care of me." Mason was going to have a talk with Martha about what she discussed around his son. "I gave up a job. Not you. Never you. And I'm not sad, I'm just tired from working nights. There's a difference." "Promise?" "Promise." They went inside and Noah disappeared into his room with his library books. Mason stood in the kitchen trying to figure out when his 7-year-old had become perceptive enough to notice things Mason thought he'd hidden successfully. His phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "This is Serena. I hope you don't mind that I got your personal number from your employer. The last 2 aircraft will be at Riverside Monday and Tuesday nights, same time. Also, there's a diner called Millie's about 3 miles from the airport. Good coffee, open 24 hours. If you want to talk about the job offer without me ambushing you during an inspection, I'll be there tomorrow morning at 7. Mason stared at the message. The smart thing would be to ignore it. Stick to purely professional communication. But something about the casual tone, the acknowledgement that she'd been ambushing him, made him respond before he thought better of it. "How did you know about Millie's?" Her reply came immediately. "I asked the airport staff where mechanics go for decent food. It was unanimous. We go there because it's cheap and the portions are big. Is that a yes or a no?" Mason typed and deleted 3 different responses. Finally settled on, "I'll think about it. I'll be there at 7 either way. Show up or don't." He didn't respond to that. Spent the rest of Saturday trying not to think about it. Failed completely. Sunday morning arrived cold and clear. Mason woke at 6 without an alarm, his body still on night shift schedule, despite having the night off. Noah wouldn't wake for another hour, at least. Martha wasn't coming today. Mason could go back to bed, or make coffee, or catch up on the household tasks he'd been ignoring. Instead, he found himself getting dressed and leaving a note for Noah. "Went to get breakfast. Back soon. Call my cell if you need me." The drive to Millie's took 6 minutes. Mason spent all 6 trying to figure out what he was doing and coming up empty. The diner was exactly as advertised. Small, worn, packed with truckers and shift workers and people who'd been up all night for various reasons. Serena Vale sat in a corner booth looking completely out of place in designer jeans and a sweater that probably cost a week of his salary. She saw him and smiled slightly. Not a warm smile. More like the smile of someone who'd won a bet with herself. Mason slid into the booth across from her. "This doesn't mean anything." "Of course not. You're just here for the coffee." "The coffee's terrible here." "I know. I already ordered some. It's truly awful." She pushed a menu toward him. "Breakfast is on me." I can pay for my own breakfast." "I'm sure you can, but I'm going to anyway because this was my idea and I make substantially more money than you do." The waitress appeared before Mason could argue. He ordered scrambled eggs and toast because it was cheap and filling. Serena ordered the same, which somehow felt like she was mocking him, though her expression remained neutral. "You read the email," Serena said after the waitress left. "How do you know?" "Because you're here. If you'd deleted it without reading, you wouldn't have shown up." "Maybe I'm just curious about what you want." "I want you to take the job." "Why? What does it matter to you what job I have?" Chicken. Serena wrapped her hands around her terrible coffee mug. "Honest answer? I don't know. Something about you bothers me. You're obviously talented, but you're hiding in a job that doesn't challenge you. You saved my life and then acted like it was no big deal. You have a kid you clearly love, but you talk about your wife like she's a closed chapter you never want to reopen. You're this puzzle I can't solve and it's driving me crazy. I'm not a puzzle. I'm just a guy trying to raise his kid. You keep saying that, but it's not the whole truth, is it? You miss your old work. I can see it when you talk about the Air Force. You light up for about 2 seconds before you remember you're supposed to not care about it anymore. Mason looked out the window at the parking lot. Even if I missed it, which I'm not confirming, it doesn't matter. I made a choice 3 years ago, and I stand by it. Choices can be revised when circumstances change. Noah still needs me. Noah needs you to be happy. Kids aren't stupid. They can tell when their parents are sacrificing too much. He said something like that yesterday, about me looking sad. See? That doesn't mean I should upend our entire life for a job that might be more interesting. Their food arrived. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The eggs were overcooked and the toast was cold, but Mason had eaten worse. Serena picked at her breakfast like she wasn't actually hungry, just going through motions. Can I tell you something? She said eventually. Something I don't usually share with people? If you want. I built my company from almost nothing, inherited a failing tech firm from my father, and everyone expected me to sell it and live off the proceeds. Instead, I gutted it, rebuilt it, made enemies, burned bridges, worked 100 hours a week for 5 years until it became what it is now. And you know what I realized recently? I don't actually have a life outside that company. I have business associates and employees and people who want things from me, but I don't have friends. I don't have family I'm close with. I don't have anyone who gives a damn about me as a person, rather than as a source of money or connections. Ishi asumiti. Mason set down his fork. Why are you telling me this? Because when I met you, you had something I don't have. You have this kid you love more than anything, and you've built this simple life that actually makes sense. You're not chasing money or status or validation from strangers. You know what matters and you protect it. And I realized I've spent 15 years building an empire that gives me everything except the things I actually need. So this is about you feeling empty and thinking my life looks appealing? No, this is about me recognizing that you're settling for less than you deserve because you're afraid of losing what you have. And I'm trying to tell you it's possible to have both, the meaningful work and the family life. You don't have to choose. Easy for you to say. You don't have a kid depending on you. You're right, I don't. But I know what it's like to be afraid of risking something good in pursuit of something better. I've made that mistake more times than I can count. I'm trying to keep you from doing the same thing. Mason pushed his plate away. You don't know me well enough to be giving me life advice. Maybe not. But I'm going to anyway, because someone should. Serena leaned forward. Take the interview. See if the job is what you want. Worst case scenario, you say no and nothing changes. Best case, you find work that fulfills you and Noah gets to see his father actually happy instead of just going through motions. I am happy. You're content. That's not the same thing. Mason wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. Because she was right in a way that made him deeply uncomfortable. He was content. He'd built a life that worked and that kept Noah safe and stable. But happy? He wasn't sure he remembered what that felt like. I'll think about it, he said finally. Good. That's all I'm asking. Serena signaled for the check. The aircraft inspections tomorrow and Tuesday. I won't bring this up again during those. Strictly professional. But after that, I want an answer about the interview. Yes or no. Don't leave it hanging. Why does it matter so much to you? Because I need to know if I'm right about you. Right about what? That you're someone worth knowing. That you're not just another person who talks big, but never takes risks. Serena paid the check despite Mason's protest. I'll see you tomorrow night. She left before he could respond. Mason sat in the booth for another 10 minutes, drinking terrible coffee and trying to figure out what had just happened. He'd gone from barely knowing Serena Vale to having her dissect his life choices over breakfast at a diner. It felt invasive and uncomfortable and oddly honest in a way most conversations in his life weren't. He drove home to find Noah awake and eating cereal while watching cartoons. Everything was normal and comfortable and exactly the way it should be. But Mason couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, that Serena Vale had walked into his carefully controlled world and pointed out all the cracks he'd been pretending didn't exist. Monday night, he inspected a Cessna Citation that belonged to Serena's company fleet. She was there, but kept her word about staying professional. They barely spoke beyond the necessary technical communication. Mason found a minor hydraulic issue and documented it. 2 hours, $2,000, back home by 1 in the morning. Tuesday was the final aircraft. Another Gulfstream, newer than the one with the cracked load beam. Mason went through his inspection routine with mechanical precision, his mind half on the work and half on the decision he still hadn't made. Serena found him checking the tail section at midnight. "This is the last one. You did good work." "You paid me to do good work. That's how jobs work. Are you going to take the interview?" Mason had known this question was coming, had spent 3 days trying to decide. "Yeah, I'll take the interview, but that's all I'm promising." "Fair enough. I'll have them contact you to schedule it." Serena paused. "Can I ask you one more thing?" "Sure." "Your son, Noah. What's he like?" The question surprised him. "Why?" "Because you talk about him like he's the center of your universe, but you've never actually described him. I'm curious." Mason thought about how to distill Noah into words. "He's 7, obsessed with dinosaurs, afraid of thunderstorms, but won't admit it. Really good at math. Asks questions that don't have good answers. Draws pictures of families that don't quite exist. He's the best thing that ever happened to me." "He sounds wonderful." "He is. Maybe I could meet him sometime." Mason looked at her sharply. "Why would you want to do that?" "Because I'd like to understand what inspires this level of devotion. And because I don't actually know any 7-year-olds. Might be interesting." "He's not a curiosity." "I didn't mean it like that." Serena's expression softened. "Look, I know I come across as cold and calculating. It's a defense mechanism I developed years ago. But I'm genuinely interested in your life, not as some puzzle to solve, but because it's so different from mine that I find it fascinating. If that's offensive, tell me, and I'll back off." Mason considered this. Every instinct said to maintain boundaries, keep his personal life separate, protect Noah from complications. But another part of him, the part that had agreed to breakfast at Millie's, that had said yes to the interview, was tired of being so rigidly controlled all the time. "There's a diner we go to on Saturday mornings. Pancakes. If you want to meet Noah, show up there. Don't make it weird." "Where?" "Same place we had breakfast, 7 in the morning this Saturday." "I'll be there." Mason finished his inspection. The aircraft was clean. He handed Serena his report and walked to his truck without looking back, feeling like he'd just made a decision he couldn't unmake. Like the careful walls he'd built around his life had developed their own hairline fractures, and he had no idea if they were structural or catastrophic. At home, Noah was asleep with his triceratops and his glow-in-the-dark stars. Everything was exactly as it should be. Mason stood in the doorway watching his son breathe and wondering if he'd just made the best decision of his life or the worst mistake. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of cold that made breath visible and turned car windshields into sheets of ice. Mason scraped frost off his truck while Noah bounced impatiently on the driveway, wearing his dinosaur jacket and the winter hat with the triceratops horns that Mason had bought him for Christmas. "Can we go? I'm hungry." "Almost done, buddy. Get in the truck where it's warm." Noah climbed into the passenger seat, his breath fogging the window. Mason finished the windshield and slid behind the wheel, the engine already running to heat the cab. He hadn't told Noah about Serena, hadn't mentioned that a billionaire who owned private jets would be joining them for pancakes, mostly because he still wasn't sure if she'd actually show up, and partly because he didn't know how to explain to a 7-year-old why his father had invited a near stranger into their Saturday morning ritual. The drive to Millie's took 8 minutes through streets still quiet with early morning. The diner's parking lot held maybe a dozen vehicles, mostly trucks that had seen better decades. Mason didn't see anything that looked like what Serena Vale would drive, which brought a confusing mixture of relief and disappointment. Inside, the diner smelled like coffee and bacon grease. Their usual booth in the back corner was empty. Noah scrambled into his seat and immediately started rearranging the sugar packets by color, a routine he performed every Saturday without fail. "Dad, can I get chocolate chip pancakes?" "You get chocolate chip pancakes every Saturday." "I know, but I like asking. Makes it feel special." Mason smiled despite himself. "Yeah, buddy. You can get chocolate chip pancakes. Wo osois amaros e. The bell above the door chimed. Mason looked up, expecting to see another early morning regular. Instead, Serena Vale walked in wearing jeans and a simple coat, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, looking more like a graduate student than a tech empire CEO. She spotted them immediately and walked over, her expression uncertain in a way Mason had never seen before. "Good morning." She directed the greeting to both of them, but her eyes settled on Noah with something that looked almost like nervousness. Noah stared at her with the blunt curiosity of children who haven't learned to pretend politeness. "Who are you?" "I'm Serena. I work with your dad sometimes." "Dad works with airplanes." "Well, I know. I own some airplanes, and your dad makes sure they're safe." Noah processed this information seriously. "That's important. Airplanes crash if they're not safe." "Exactly. Your dad is very good at keeping that from happening." Serena looked at Mason. "Is it okay if I sit?" Mason gestured to the empty side of the booth. Serena slid in across from them, looking more out of place than she had at the airport. At least there she'd been surrounded by expensive machines and professional context. Here, with sticky laminate tables and a 7-year-old rearranging sugar packets, she seemed genuinely uncertain about what to do with herself. The waitress appeared. Mason ordered his usual coffee and eggs. Noah ordered chocolate chip pancakes with extra chocolate chips. Serena studied the menu like it was written in a foreign language. "What's good here?" "Nothing's good here," Noah said matter-of-factly, "but the pancakes are okay, and Dad says the portions are big." "Then I'll have what you're having, chocolate chip pancakes." Noah looked impressed. Most grown-ups don't order chocolate chips. Most grown-ups are missing out. The waitress left with their order. An awkward silence descended. Mason watched Serena try to figure out how to talk to a 7-year-old while Noah went back to organizing sugar packets, apparently unconcerned about the billionaire sitting across from him. "So," Serena said eventually, "your dad tells me you like dinosaurs." Noah's head snapped up. "I love dinosaurs. Do you know about dinosaurs?" "Not much. I know they were big and went extinct millions of years ago." 66 million years ago. Except birds. Birds are technically dinosaurs. They evolved from theropods. But Noah spoke with the absolute confidence of someone who'd read every dinosaur book the library owned. "My favorite is Ankylosaurus because it had armor and a clubtail for defense." "What's your favorite?" Serena blinked. "I don't think I have one." "You have to have a favorite. Everyone has a favorite dinosaur." "Okay, what about T-Rex? Is that too obvious?" Noah considered this seriously. "T-Rex is a good choice. Apex predator, excellent binocular vision, bite force of 6 tons. But it's kind of the default answer. You should have a more interesting favorite." "All right. What would you recommend?" "Parasaurolophus. It had this long crest on its head that it used to make sounds. Scientists think they could communicate over long distances using low-frequency calls. They're basically the dinosaur version of whales." "That's fascinating. Okay, that's my new favorite, Parasaurolophus." Noah smiled, apparently satisfied that he'd educated her properly. Mason watched this exchange feeling oddly off balance. He'd expected Serena to be awkward with Noah, or condescending, or uncomfortable. Instead, she was actually listening, engaging with his son's enthusiasm in a way that seemed genuine rather than performed. The food arrived. Noah drowned his pancakes in syrup with the efficiency of long practice. Serena cut her pancakes into precise squares, then seemed to realize what she was doing and stopped, instead attacking them with less geometry and more enthusiasm. "These are really good," she said, sounding surprised. "Told you," Noah said through a mouthful of chocolate and pancake. "Dad, can Serena come to breakfast with us again?" Mason nearly choked on his coffee. "That's up to Serena. She's probably busy most Saturdays." "Actually, I'm usually not busy on Saturdays. I work most of the week, but I try to keep weekends clear." "Then you should come back," Noah said with the straightforward logic of someone who didn't understand why adults made things complicated. "We come here every Saturday." "Well, not every Saturday. Sometimes Dad has to work, but most Saturdays." "I'd like that." Serena looked at Mason. "If it's okay with your dad." Mason found himself nodding despite every rational voice in his head telling him this was a mistake. Sure, yeah, it's fine. They finished breakfast. Noah told Serena about his favorite books and his school and the project he was working on about the solar system. Serena listened with what appeared to be genuine interest, asking questions that weren't patronizing and responding to Noah's explanations with appropriate reactions. She seemed more relaxed than Mason had ever seen her, like being around a 7-year-old with no filter somehow made it easier to be herself. When the check came, Serena reached for it automatically. Mason grabbed it first. I've got this. Let me pay. I invited myself. You're a guest. Guests don't pay. I'm a billionaire. You're a mechanic. Let me pay. No. Serena stared at him. You're serious. This is our tradition. I pay for Saturday breakfast. That's how it works. That's a stupid tradition when someone with substantially more money is sitting right here offering to cover it. Dad always pays, Noah contributed helpfully. Even when Martha offers. He says it's about responsibility or something. It's about maintaining control over my own life, Mason said, pulling out cash for the bill and tip. And teaching Noah that you don't let people pay for things just because they have more money than you. Serena opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, then seemed to think better of it. Fine, but next time I'm paying. Next time you can try. They left the diner together. The parking lot had filled up with the late morning crowd. Noah ran ahead to the truck, apparently having accepted Serena's presence without any of the complications adults brought to such things. Thank you for this, Serena said quietly. I know I pushed my way into your morning, but Noah's wonderful. You're doing a great job with him. I'm doing my best. That's all anyone can do. It's more than that. He's confident and curious and kind. Those things don't happen by accident. Mason unlocked his truck. Did you get what you came for? Figure out your puzzle? Maybe. Or maybe I just enjoyed eating chocolate chip pancakes with a 7-year-old who knows more about dinosaurs than most paleontologists. Serena paused. The interview is scheduled for Thursday, 2 p.m. at Meridian's facility in Columbus. They're expecting you. I didn't say yes yet. You said you take the interview. That's saying yes to showing up, at least. What if I don't want the job? Then don't take it. But go to the interview anyway. See what they're offering. Make an informed decision instead of deciding from fear. Mason bristled. I'm not afraid. Yes, you are. You're terrified of changing anything because you think stability is the same as safety. But it's not. Sometimes staying still is the most dangerous thing you can do. Before Mason could respond, Noah called from inside the truck. Dad, can we go to the library? Yeah, buddy, 1 second. Mason looked back at Serena. You don't know me well enough to tell me what I'm afraid of. Maybe not, but I know what it looks like when someone's built walls so high they can't see past them anymore. Serena pulled her keys from her pocket. I'll see you next Saturday. If you want me to come back. Noah wants you to come back. So yeah, come back. What about you? Do you want me to come back? Mason didn't have a good answer for that. The honest truth was complicated. He did and didn't want her to come back simultaneously. She made him uncomfortable and challenged him and said things that poked at the carefully maintained equilibrium of his life. But she also listened to Noah talk about dinosaurs with genuine interest and ate cheap diner pancakes without complaint, and seemed to actually give a damn about whether Mason was wasting his potential or protecting what mattered most. I don't know yet, he said finally. Ask me again in a few weeks. Fair enough. Serena walked to her car, which turned out to be a Tesla that definitely didn't belong in Millie's parking lot. Mason watched her drive away, then climbed into his truck where Noah was already buckling his seatbelt. I like her, Noah announced. She's nice. Yeah? Yeah. She didn't talk to me like I'm stupid. Most adults do that. She's different, that's for sure. They drove to the library. Noah checked out 4 books about space and 1 about prehistoric marine life. Mason tried not to think about Thursday's interview or Saturday's breakfast or the way Serena had looked at him like she could see through all his defenses to the person he used to be. The week passed in its usual rhythm. Mason worked his shifts, helped Noah with homework, fixed the leaking pipe under Martha's sink, avoided thinking about the future. But Thursday arrived anyway, indifferent to his reluctance. He dropped Noah at school and drove to Columbus, arriving at Meridian Defense Solutions 20 minutes early. The facility was massive, multiple hangars, administrative buildings, security checkpoints that rivaled military bases. Mason gave his name at the gate and was directed to Building C, where apparently his interview would take place. The lobby was all glass and steel and corporate professionalism. Mason signed in with a receptionist who looked at his worn jeans and work boots with barely concealed judgment. A woman in a sharp business suit appeared minutes later. "Mr. Reed, I'm Karen Walsh, Director of Technical Operations. Thank you for coming. Please follow me." She led him through corridors that smelled like new carpet and filtered air. Everything was aggressively clean and organized in ways that made Riverside Regional look like a scrapyard. They entered a conference room where two men waited, both wearing the kind of business casual that suggested they'd never turned a wrench in their lives. This is David Chen, our Chief of Maintenance Operations, and Robert Graves, Senior Engineer. Gentlemen, Mason Reed. Handshakes all around. Everyone sat. Mason felt underdressed and out of place, but he'd felt that way in military briefings plenty of times. He knew how to sit still and project confidence he didn't necessarily feel. "Your resume is impressive," Chen said, glancing at papers spread before him. 12 years Air Force, Special Operations Support, multiple deployments, commendations for technical excellence, then 3 years at a small regional airport doing basic maintenance. That's quite a shift. Family circumstances required it. You have a son, correct? 7 years old? That's right. Single father? That's right. Must be challenging working night shifts with a young child at home. Mason kept his expression neutral. "I manage. I'm sure you do." Chen set down the papers. "The position we're considering you for is Senior Aviation Systems Inspector. You'd be responsible for comprehensive maintenance evaluation of tactical aircraft, failure analysis, technical consultation on complex systems. The work is demanding and requires a high level of expertise. Based on your military background, you clearly have that expertise. What concerns us is the gap. 3 years doing routine pre-flight inspections doesn't exactly keep those skills sharp. I found a structural crack in a Gulf Stream 2 weeks ago that would have resulted in catastrophic wing separation during flight. The aircraft had been inspected multiple times by certified professionals who missed it completely. I found it during a routine pre-flight because I actually looked instead of just checking boxes on a form." Walsh leaned forward slightly. "We heard about that. Serena Vale's aircraft. She spoke very highly of your work." "She's the one who recommended me for this position. We're aware. Ms. Vale has significant influence in our industry. When she makes a recommendation, we pay attention." Walsh glanced at her colleagues. "But we need to ensure this is a good fit regardless of who made the introduction. Tell me about your Air Force experience. What kind of aircraft did you work on?" Mason had known this question was coming, had debated how much to reveal. The truth was most of his military service was still technically classified, covered by non-disclosure agreements and security protocols that didn't expire just because he'd separated from service. "I worked on various tactical aircraft, fighters, transports, special mission modifications. I can't be more specific than that." "No. You were assigned to Special Operations Support," Graves said. "That's not a typical maintenance posting." "No, it's not. What did that entail?" "Technical support for specialized aircraft and systems. Again, I can't be more specific. Your commendation mentions extraordinary technical achievement. Can you elaborate on what earned you that recognition?" "No, sir. It's classified." The 3 interviewers exchanged glances. Mason could see them trying to figure out if he was being deliberately difficult or if the security restrictions were legitimate. The truth was somewhere in the middle. He genuinely couldn't discuss most of his military work, but he also wasn't particularly interested in reliving those years in a corporate conference room. "Let me ask a different question," Walsh said. "Why did you leave? You were clearly on a strong career trajectory. Senior Master Sergeant at 30 is remarkable. Most people in that position don't walk away from it voluntarily. My wife left when my son was 6 months old. I was deploying regularly. Noah needed stable parenting. I couldn't provide that while maintaining my military career, so I requested discharge under family hardship provisions. It was approved. That must have been difficult. It was necessary. And now your son is older, more independent. What made you consider coming back to this kind of work? Mason thought about how to answer honestly. I didn't consider it. Someone else suggested I was wasting my skills and should explore opportunities that might be more fulfilling than pre-flight inspections for private jets. I agreed to take this interview to see if she was right. The someone being Serena Vale? Yes. Chen smiled slightly. She has a habit of identifying talent and being persistent about not letting it go to waste. She's usually right. He pulled out a folder. Here's what we're prepared to offer. Base salary of $92,000, comprehensive benefits, day shift with rotating weekend coverage 1 week per month. You'd have access to some of the most advanced aircraft in civilian tactical operations, working with a team of engineers and technicians who are among the best in the industry. Projects would range from routine maintenance evaluation to complex failure investigation to consultation on new system integration. Mason took the folder but didn't open it. $92,000, more than double his current salary. The kind of money that would mean he could fix the truck properly, replace Noah's wardrobe when he outgrew it, put away savings for emergencies and college, and all the things single fathers worried about at 3 in the morning. I need to think about it, Mason said. Of course. We're not expecting an answer today. Take a week. Review the full offer package. Consider whether this opportunity aligns with your personal and professional goals. Walsh stood, extending her hand. It was a pleasure meeting you, Mr. Reed. I hope we'll have the chance to work together. More handshakes. Walsh walked him back to the lobby. Mason drove home in a daze, the folder sitting on the passenger seat like physical evidence of a future he hadn't asked for but couldn't quite dismiss. He picked up Noah from school. They did homework together at the kitchen table while Mason tried not to think about the decision looming in front of him. Noah seemed to sense his distraction. Dad, are you okay? Yeah, buddy. Just thinking about work stuff. What kind of work stuff? What, bossy? Boring adult things. Don't worry about it. But Noah did worry about it, in the way perceptive children worry about their parents, even when they pretend not to. That evening, he was quieter than usual, drawing pictures at the kitchen table while Mason made dinner. When Mason looked at the drawings later, he found they'd shifted from their usual family compositions to pictures of airplanes and hangars and tiny figures that looked like mechanics. Friday night, Mason worked his shift at Riverside Regional. Carl asked about the interview with barely concealed curiosity. How'd it go? They made an offer. You taking it? I don't know yet. Reed, if you're thinking about turning down a job that pays double what we pay you, you're an idiot. No offense. None taken. It's more complicated than just money. It's never more complicated than money. Money solves problems. You've got a kid to raise and bills to pay, and a truck that sounds like it's held together with prayer. Take the job. But Mason wasn't convinced it was that simple. Money solved some problems while creating others. A new job meant new routines, different schedules, disruption to the careful life he and Noah had built. It meant trusting that the stability wouldn't shatter the moment he reached for something more. Saturday morning arrived cold and overcast. Mason woke early, made coffee, stared at the job offer folder he'd left on the kitchen counter. Noah found him there when he shuffled out of his room. Are we going to breakfast? Yeah, buddy, get dressed. Is Serena coming? I don't know, maybe. Noah seemed satisfied with that answer. 20 minutes later, they were driving to Millie's through streets slick with overnight rain. The diner's parking lot held the usual collection of early morning vehicles plus one Tesla that definitely didn't belong. Inside, Serena sat in their usual booth drinking coffee and looking at her phone. She glanced up when they entered, her expression warming slightly. Good morning. Noah scrambled into the booth beside her without hesitation. Hi, Serena. Did you know that some dinosaurs had feathers? Like actual feathers, not scales. They looked like giant chickens. I did not know that. Were they still scary? Oh yeah, velociraptors had feathers, and they could hunt in packs and coordinate attacks. Feathers don't make you less dangerous. Mason slid into the booth across from them, watching this interaction with a mixture of amusement and something more complicated. Noah had accepted Serena into their Saturday routine with the easy adaptability of children. But Mason couldn't shake the feeling that her presence was changing something fundamental about the careful boundaries he'd drawn around their lives. They ordered breakfast. Chocolate chip pancakes for Noah and Serena, eggs and toast for Mason. The conversation flowed easily, mostly driven by Noah's enthusiastic explanations of whatever had captured his interest that week. Serena asked questions and listened and responded in ways that suggested she was genuinely engaged rather than just being polite. "Did you do the interview?" She asked Mason during a brief lull while Noah reorganized sugar packets. "Yeah, Thursday." "And?" "Yes. They made an offer." "What did you tell them?" "That I needed to think about it." Serena stirred her coffee slowly. "Fair enough. What's holding you back?" "Everything. Noah's schedule, my shift work, the commute. Whether I can actually do that kind of work again after 3 years away from it. Whether it's worth disrupting our entire life for better pay and more interesting projects. Those are all legitimate concerns. What does Noah think?" Mason glanced at his son, who was building a pyramid from sugar packets with intense concentration. "I haven't told him yet." "Why not?" "Well, because I don't want to get his hopes up if I decide not to take it, or worry him if I decide to take it, and it changes everything." "You're protecting him from hypothetical problems." "I'm protecting him from unnecessary stress." "Mason." Serena kept her voice low enough that Noah couldn't hear. "You can't protect him from everything, and trying to shield him from change isn't the same as keeping him safe." "You don't have kids. You don't understand." "You're right. I don't. But I understand what it's like to be so afraid of losing something that you refuse to reach for anything better." Mason felt anger stirring. "This isn't about fear. Then what's it about?" "It's about being responsible, about not taking unnecessary risks with my son's well-being, about accepting that sometimes good enough is actually good enough." Their food arrived before Serena could respond. They ate in tense silence. The easy atmosphere from earlier evaporated. Noah seemed to sense the shift, glancing between them with concern. "Are you guys mad at each other?" "Nobody," Mason said. "Just disagreeing about something. It's fine." "Dad disagrees with people at work sometimes," Noah told Serena. "But then they figure it out, and it's okay again." "Your dad is good at figuring things out," Serena said, though her eyes remained on Mason. "Even when it takes him a while." They finished breakfast. Mason paid despite Serena's attempt to grab the check first. Outside in the parking lot, Noah ran ahead to the truck while Serena and Mason lingered near her Tesla. "I'm sorry," Serena said. "I pushed too hard. Your decisions about your career and your son are none of my business." "You're right, though, about most of it. I am afraid. I am protecting him from hypothetical problems. I am settling for good enough because reaching for better feels too risky." "So what are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out." Mason hesitated. "Are you coming back next Saturday?" "Do you want me to?" "Noah does. That's reason enough. It's, what about you?" Mason looked at her standing there in the cold parking lot, this complicated billionaire who'd somehow inserted herself into their lives and refused to fit any of the boxes he tried to put her in. "Yeah, I want you to come back too." Something in Serena's expression softened. "Okay, next Saturday, same time." Same time. Mason drove home with Noah chattering about dinosaurs and pancakes, and whether Serena would want to see his school project about the solar system. The job offer folder sat in the glove compartment where Mason had stashed it, full of papers he still needed to read and decisions he still needed to make. That night, after Noah fell asleep beneath his glow-in-the-dark stars, Mason finally opened the folder. He read through everything carefully. The salary details, the benefits package, the job description, the expectations. It was good. Better than good. It was exactly the kind of opportunity he'd once dreamed about, back when he'd still allowed himself to have career ambitions beyond just keeping his head down and getting through each day. His phone buzzed. Text from Serena. "I meant what I said. Your decisions are yours to make. But I hope you'll at least consider that maybe Noah would be proud to see his father doing work that actually challenges him. Kids need security, but they also need to see their parents as whole people with lives beyond just parenting." Mason stared at the message for a long time before responding. "How did you get so wise about parenting when you don't have kids?" Her reply came quickly. I had parents who were so busy building empires they forgot I existed. I learned what not to do. I'm sorry. Don't be. It made me who I am, but it also taught me that there's a balance between protection and suffocation. I think you're tilting too far toward protection. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just being careful. Careful is good, but careful shouldn't mean frozen. Mason set down his phone and looked at the ceiling of his bedroom, thinking about frozen versus careful, protection versus suffocation, good enough versus actually good. Thinking about Noah's drawings of incomplete families and questions about whether Mason was happy. Thinking about cracks in aircraft structures and hairline fractures in the walls he'd built around his life. He didn't have answers yet, but for the first time in 3 years, he was starting to ask different questions. The call came at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday, yanking Mason from shallow sleep into immediate alertness. Years of military training meant he was fully conscious before his hand reached the phone on his nightstand. This is Mason. Mr. Reed, this is David Kemp, Serena Vale's Chief of Staff. I apologize for calling at this hour, but we have an emergency situation. Mason was already sitting up, reaching for the jeans he'd left on the chair. What kind of emergency? One of Ms. Vale's aircraft experienced catastrophic hydraulic failure over the Atlantic. Citation X carrying 4 executives from London to New York. They've declared an emergency and are attempting to divert to Shannon Airport in Ireland, but the pilots are reporting they're losing control authority. Ms. Vale is asking for you. Why? She has engineers for this. She has 6 engineers on a conference call right now, and none of them can figure out what's happening fast enough. She asked for you specifically, said you understand aircraft in ways her regular people don't. Mason was already moving, pulling on his shirt, looking for his boots. Put her on. The line clicked. Serena's voice came through, strained but controlled. Mason, thank you. I know you don't technically work for me, but I'm out of options. What's the situation? Citation X tail, number November. 7-4. Yankee Victor. Departed London City 3 hours ago. About 90 minutes into the Atlantic crossing, they started losing hydraulic pressure in the primary system. Switched to backup. Backup is failing now too. They're down to manual controls only, and the pilots are saying the aircraft is barely responding. Mason's brain shifted into the analytical mode he hadn't accessed fully in 3 years. How fast is the pressure dropping? Primary system went from full to 0 in about 20 minutes. Backup is dropping slower but still declining. They've got maybe 30 minutes before they lose everything. What's the failure pattern? Sudden or gradual? Pilots reported normal operation, then a rapid decline in primary. Backup seemed stable at first but started degrading about 40 minutes ago. Right? That's not a seal failure. Seals leak gradually. This is catastrophic line rupture or pump failure, probably both systems affected by the same root cause. Mason grabbed his truck keys, his phone pressed between shoulder and ear. Are they still over water? Just reached the Irish coast. Shannon is their best option, but they need to land in the next 20 minutes or they're not landing at all. Put me through to the cockpit. Another click. Static. Then a voice with British accent fighting to stay professional through obvious stress. This is Captain Morrison. Who am I speaking with? Mason Reed, Aviation Systems Specialist. I need you to describe exactly what's happening with your controls. Manual reversion only. Yoke feels like pushing through concrete. Rudder response is maybe 30% normal. We're maintaining level flight, but barely. Every input requires full force, and the aircraft is sluggish to respond. Okay, listen carefully. You've got dual system failure, which means whatever caused it affected both hydraulic systems simultaneously. That almost never happens unless there's a common failure point. Do you have any unusual vibration or noise from the tail section? Now that you mention it, yes. Started about the same time as the hydraulic issues. Low-frequency vibration, felt through the airframe. That's your smoking gun. You probably have a structural issue in the tail that damaged both hydraulic lines running through that section. The vibration means something back there is loose or failing. Mason was driving now, his truck roaring through empty streets toward the airport. He didn't know why he was going to the airport except that it felt necessary. Here's what you need to do. Reduce your speed as much as safely possible without stalling. Slower speed means less aerodynamic force on the damaged structure and less pressure demand on what's left of your hydraulics. Configure for landing early while you still have some control authority. Don't wait until final approach. Copy that. Reducing to minimum safe speed. Shannon approach is clearing us direct to runway. Emergency equipment standing by. Good. Once you're configured, lock your inputs and don't make sudden movements. Small corrections only. The less you demand from those hydraulics, the longer they'll last. Understood. Can you stay on the line? I'm here, not going anywhere. Mason pulled into Riverside Regional and parked near the maintenance hangar. His phone showed multiple missed calls from Carl, but he ignored them. Through the phone, he could hear Captain Morrison communicating with air traffic control, the co-pilot reading checklists, the tense professional calm of aviators dealing with a situation that could kill everyone aboard. Gear down. Morrison's voice was tight. 3 green lights, flaps 20, aircraft is responding, but it's taking everything we've got. You're doing fine, Mason said. Just keep it smooth. Shannon's got a long runway. You don't need perfect, you just need good enough. Reed? Serena's voice cut in on a parallel line. I'm still here, what's happening? They're setting up for landing. It's going to be rough, but they should make it. Should? Nothing's guaranteed, but Morrison knows what he's doing, and they've still got partial control. That's better than some emergency landings I've seen. Have you done this before? Talked pilots through emergencies? A few times, different situations, similar principles. Mason didn't elaborate on where or when those situations had occurred. Stay quiet now. They need to concentrate. Whoa! Bombment. Through the phone, Mason heard Morrison calling altitudes and airspeeds, the co-pilot responding, the sound of an aircraft fighting its pilots every inch of the way. 2,000 feet, 1,500, 1,000. The runway was in sight, emergency vehicles positioned along the taxiway, the landing lights of Shannon Airport blazing in the Irish darkness. 500 feet, Morrison said. Airspeed good, sync rate high but manageable. You've got this, Mason said. 30 seconds and you're on the ground. The final approach seemed to stretch forever. Mason stood in the empty hangar listening to an aircraft fight for its life 3,000 miles away, his knuckles white around his phone. He'd talked to plenty of pilots during his military service, had helped diagnose problems remotely before, but this felt different. This was Serena's aircraft. These were people she knew, and for reasons he couldn't quite articulate, her trust that he could help meant something that went beyond professional competence. 200 feet, 150. Morrison's voice was absolutely controlled. Flare, hold it, hold it. The sound of landing gear touching concrete came through the phone, not smooth, but solid. Then the roar of thrust reversers and brakes, 10 seconds of mechanical violence as the aircraft scrubbed off speed. Then silence, except for heavy breathing. We're down. We're safe. Shannon ground. November 7-4. Yankee Victor is clear of the active runway. Serena's voice came through, shaking slightly. Thank you, Captain. Thank you. Mason let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Captain Morrison, you did excellent work. Get your passengers off and let the investigators take over. That aircraft isn't flying again until someone figures out what failed. Copy that. And thank you, Mr. Reed. I don't know who you are, but you may have just saved our lives. Just doing what needed doing. Safe travels. The line disconnected. Mason stood alone in the dark hangar, adrenaline slowly draining from his system. His phone buzzed immediately, Serena calling directly. How did you know? Her voice was raw. How did you know it was structural damage in the tail causing the hydraulic failure? Because dual system failure is almost impossible unless there's a common cause. And the vibration the pilot described was consistent with loose or damaged structure, creating a cascade effect. It was an educated guess based on pattern recognition. Mason, my engineers didn't figure that out. 6 people with advanced degrees and decades of experience, and none of them put it together. But you did, in about 30 seconds. Positive. They were probably focused on the hydraulic systems themselves. I went backward from the symptoms to find the root cause. That's not a small distinction. That's not a... That's the difference between life and death for four people I've known for years. Mason heard something crack in her voice. Not quite crying, but close. The controlled facade that Serena wore like armor was coming apart. Are you okay? He asked. No, I'm not okay. I just almost killed four people because I didn't maintain my aircraft properly. Because I trusted inspections that were clearly inadequate. Because I was too busy running a company to pay attention to whether the machines I put people inside were actually safe. That's not how this works. You hired professionals to maintain those aircraft. They failed, not you. I hired cheap professionals. I went with the lowest bidder on maintenance contracts because I thought all inspections were basically the same. And now four people almost died because I made that decision. Mason sat down on a workbench, his own exhaustion catching up with him. Serena, listen to me. You can't control everything. You can hire the best people and do everything right, and things still fail. That's reality. What matters is you got them on the ground safely. Because of you. If you hadn't answered the phone, someone else would have figured it out eventually. Morrison would have landed that aircraft one way or another. I just helped speed up the process. Don't minimize what you did. Please, I need you to understand that you just saved four lives with a phone call and pattern recognition and whatever instinct lets you hear a symptom and immediately know the cause. That's not normal. That's exceptional. Mason didn't know what to say to that. He'd spent 3 years deliberately not being exceptional at anything except being Noah's father. Being exceptional in his military career had meant deployments and stress, and eventually having to choose between the work and his family. He'd chosen family and walked away from exceptional without looking back. But sitting in the empty hangar at 2:30 in the morning, listening to Serena Vale come apart at the seams over a disaster that hadn't quite happened, Mason felt something stirring in his chest. Not regret exactly, more like recognition. The recognition that maybe he'd been lying to himself about being content with good enough. I need to see the aircraft, he said. When the Irish authorities are done with their investigation, I need to inspect that citation personally. Why? Because dual hydraulic failure from structural damage doesn't happen randomly. Something caused it, and I need to know if it's a maintenance issue or a manufacturing defect or sabotage. Sabotage. Serena's voice sharpened. You think someone deliberately damaged my aircraft? I don't know. But I don't believe in coincidence when it comes to aviation failures. The Gulfstream had a crack that should have been caught during routine inspection. Now, a citation has structural failure that took out both hydraulic systems. Either you have the worst luck in the industry, or someone needs to look at your entire maintenance program to figure out what's being missed. There was a long pause. Mason, are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying I'll take the job. The one at Meridian. But I want to consult on your fleet as well. Complete teardown inspection of every aircraft you own. No contracts, no corporate bureaucracy. You pay me directly and I tell you exactly what's wrong with your maintenance program. Done. Whatever you need, whatever it costs. It'll cost a lot. This kind of inspection isn't quick and it isn't cheap. I don't care about the money. I care about not killing people. When can you start? Mason looked around the dark hangar, thinking about Carl and Riverside Regional and the comfortable mediocrity he'd been hiding in for 3 years. I need to give 2 weeks' notice here. I need to talk to my son. I need to figure out logistics. But yeah, I can start soon. Thank you. I can't tell you what this means. You can tell me by fixing whatever's wrong with your operation, and by never putting people in aircraft you're not absolutely certain are safe. I will. I promise. Serena's voice was steadier now. Mason, there's something else. I'm coming to Ohio this weekend. I want to see Noah. I want to tell him in person how his father saved 4 people's lives tonight. He should know what you did. That's not necessary. Yes, it is. Kids need to see their parents as heroes sometimes. Let me give him that. Mason thought about Noah's questions about whether he was happy, about whether his military work had been important, about the drawings of incomplete families and the worry in a 7-year-old's eyes, that suggested he understood more than he should about sacrifice and compromise. Okay, Saturday breakfast. Same as always. I'll be there. They hung up. Mason sat alone in the hangar for another 20 minutes, processing everything that had just happened. Somewhere over the Atlantic, 4 executives were standing on solid ground instead of floating in wreckage because Mason had been able to hear a symptom and know what it meant. That wasn't small. That wasn't just being a competent mechanic. That was the kind of skill set that had made him valuable in the military and that he'd been actively suppressing ever since. He drove home through pre-dawn darkness. Martha was asleep on his couch again, had clearly come over when his truck wasn't in the driveway, and she'd realized he was gone. He woke her gently. Sorry, Martha. Work emergency. Everything okay? Yeah, everything's fine now. Thanks for staying with Noah, Shut. After she left, Mason checked on his son. Noah was sprawled across his bed with his stuffed triceratops, completely unaware that his father had just spent the last hour helping land an aircraft in distress. The glow-in-the-dark stars cast their familiar greenish light across peaceful features. Mason stood in the doorway, feeling the weight of decisions he'd just made. Taking the Meridian job meant change, meant day shifts and different routines, and trusting that Noah could handle the disruption. Meant admitting that Serena had been right about him settling for less than he was capable of. But it also meant something else. It meant showing Noah that sometimes taking risks was worth it. That being careful was important, but being frozen in place was worse. That fathers could be more than just steady and reliable. They could also be challenged and fulfilled and working at the edge of their abilities instead of safely in the middle. The next morning, Mason called Meridian and accepted their offer. Then he called Carl and gave notice, enduring 10 minutes of protest and guilt-tripping before his supervisor finally accepted that Mason was leaving. Word spread fast through the small airport community. By evening, 3 different mechanics had stopped by to ask if the rumors were true, if Mason Reed was really leaving Riverside Regional for some fancy defense contractor job. It's the right move, one of them said. You were always too good for this place anyway. Mason wasn't sure about that. But he was sure that staying because it was comfortable had stopped being enough somewhere around the time he'd found a crack in a Gulf Stream and met a billionaire who refused to let him hide. He told Noah Thursday evening, sitting at the kitchen table after homework was complete. Buddy, I need to talk to you about something important. Iwot. Noah looked up from his dinosaur book with immediate concern. Are you okay? Are you sick? No, nothing like that. I got a new job, better pay, working on more interesting aircraft. But it means some things will change. What things? I'll be working days instead of nights. You'll go to the after-school program instead of me picking you up right when school ends. I might be more tired some evenings because the work will be harder, but I'll be home for dinner most nights instead of sleeping while you're awake. Noah processed this carefully. Will we still have Saturday breakfast? Yeah, Saturday breakfast doesn't change. Will Serena still come? I think so, if she wants to. Okay. Noah seemed to consider whether anything else needed asking. Dad, is this because of what I said? About you looking sad? Mason's chest tightened. No, buddy. This is because I had an opportunity to do work that's more interesting and pays better. But also, you were right. I wasn't sad exactly, but I wasn't challenged either. This job will challenge me. That's good. Will you be happy? I think so. Yeah. Then I'm happy too. Noah went back to his dinosaur book like the conversation was settled, his child's ability to accept change making the whole thing seem simpler than it was. Saturday morning arrived with unexpected warmth, an early spring thaw that turned everything to mud and slush. Mason and Noah drove to Millie's through streets still streaked with winter's last gasp. Serena's Tesla was already in the parking lot when they arrived. Inside, she sat in their booth looking tired. Not her usual put-together self, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, no makeup, wearing jeans and a sweatshirt that looked like she'd slept in it. But she smiled when Noah scrambled into the booth beside her. Good morning. How's my favorite dinosaur expert? Good. Did you know that pterodactyls weren't actually dinosaurs? They were flying reptiles. People always get that wrong. I did not know that. Thank you for educating me. Serena looked at Mason. Can we tell him? Mason nodded. Go ahead. Serena turned to Noah with sudden seriousness. I need to tell you something about your dad. Earlier this week, one of my airplanes had a really bad problem while it was flying. The pilots were in trouble and didn't know how to fix it. My engineers couldn't figure it out fast enough. So I called your dad at 2 in the morning, and he talked to the pilots and figured out what was wrong and helped them land the airplane safely. 4 people are alive right now because your dad knew exactly what to do in an emergency. He's a hero. Noah stared at his father with wide eyes. Really? It wasn't that dramatic, Mason said. I just helped diagnose a problem remotely. Don't listen to him, Serena told Noah. It was extremely dramatic. The airplane was barely flying. The pilots were running out of options. Your dad stayed on the phone with them for 20 minutes and guided them through an emergency landing. Without him, those people might have died. Noah's expression was complex, pride and concern and curiosity all mixed together. Were you scared, Dad? A little, but mostly I was focused on the problem. That's what you do in emergencies. You focus. Is that what you did in the Air Force? Help people in emergencies? Sometimes, yeah. And that's what your new job will be? Mason glanced at Serena, who nodded encouragingly. Similar, I'll be inspecting aircraft and finding problems before they become emergencies, making sure airplanes are safe so pilots never have to deal with situations like the one this week. That's important, Noah said seriously. Airplanes should be safe. Exactly. That's why I'm taking this job. Because I'm good at making sure they're safe, and I should be using that skill instead of just doing basic inspections. Their food arrived. They ate breakfast together, the conversation drifting to safer topics like Noah's school project and whether Parasaurolophus could really communicate over long distances. But Mason caught Serena watching him several times with an expression he couldn't quite read. Not gratitude exactly, something more complicated. After breakfast, in the parking lot, Serena pulled Mason aside while Noah ran ahead to the truck. I meant what I said. You're exceptional at what you do, and I'm grateful you are finally doing it again. I'm nervous, Mason admitted. I've been out of this kind of work for 3 years. What if I'm not as good as I used to be? You just talked pilots through an emergency landing with zero preparation and minimal information. You found a structural crack my engineers missed. You're plenty good enough. Serena hesitated. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. When you left the Air Force, did you resent Noah for it, even a little? The question caught him off guard. No, never. Why? Because I'm trying to understand how someone gives up everything for another person without bitterness. My parents resented me for existing. Every sacrifice they made sure I knew about it. They counted the cost constantly. But you don't do that. You gave up your career for Noah, and you've never once made him feel guilty about it. Because it wasn't his fault. He didn't ask to be born. He didn't ask for his mother to leave. Those were circumstances beyond his control. Making him feel guilty for needing his father would be cruel. Most people aren't capable of that kind of selflessness. It's not selfless. He's my kid. Taking care of him is literally my job as his father. You say that like it's simple. It's not simple. It's extraordinary. Serena looked toward the truck where Noah waited. Serena looked. He's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have him. He gave me a reason to keep going when everything else fell apart. They stood in the parking lot, the morning sun warming the lingering puddles from yesterday's rain. Mason felt like something between them had shifted again, some invisible boundary crossed. Serena had started as a client, become something like an antagonist, transformed into someone who challenged him to be better, and now seemed to be settling into a role he couldn't quite define. Friend felt inadequate. Mentor felt wrong. There was no good word for what Serena Vale was becoming in his life. I should go, Mason said. Noah's got a birthday party this afternoon. Some kid from his class. Next Saturday? Yeah, same time, Serena nodded. I'll be here. The following week passed in a blur of final shifts at Riverside Regional, paperwork for Meridian, arrangements for Noah's after-school program, and constant low-grade anxiety about whether he was making the right decision. Carl threw him a small going-away gathering in the maintenance hangar. Pizza and beer, and a card signed by everyone Mason had worked with for 3 years. It was awkward and touching in equal measure. You're going to do great at that fancy new place, one of the mechanics said. but we're going to miss having someone around here who actually knows what he's doing. Mason's first day at Meridian was overwhelming. The facility was enormous, the equipment state-of-the-art, the other inspectors clearly competent and experienced. He spent 8 hours touring the operation, meeting people, learning procedures, and fighting the persistent feeling that he was in over his head. But on his second day, they brought him a troubled aircraft, transport helicopter with intermittent electrical issues that 3 different technicians had failed to diagnose. Mason spent 2 hours methodically working through the systems, using techniques he'd learned in the military and refined through years of experience. Eventually he found it, a damaged wire bundle deep in the tail boom that was causing sporadic shorts. Simple problem, difficult location, easy to miss if you weren't looking in exactly the right place. How long did it take you to find that, Karen Walsh asked when he reported his findings. 2 hours. Our team spent 6 days looking for that fault. How did you know where to check? Process of elimination and pattern recognition. The symptoms suggested a short circuit somewhere in the tail section. There are only so many places wire bundles run through that area. I checked them systematically until I found the damaged one. Walsh smiled. I think you're going to fit in here just fine, Mr. Reed. That evening, Mason picked up Noah from the after-school program. His son was full of stories about the games they'd played and the snacks they'd had, and the new friend he'd made named Marcus, who also liked dinosaurs. How was your day, Dad? Good. Hard, but good. I fixed a helicopter that other people couldn't fix. Cool. Was it broken bad? Not too bad, just tricky to find the problem. Oops. They drove home together, the new routine already starting to feel normal. Noah chattered about his day while Mason half listened, his mind still partly on the helicopter and the diagnostic process and the satisfaction of solving a problem that had stumped other people. It felt good. It felt like using parts of his brain that had been dormant for years. At home, Mason made dinner while Noah did homework. They ate together, cleaned up together, fell into the evening routine that was familiar even if the timing had shifted. Bath, pajamas, story time, glow-in-the-dark stars. Dad? Noah asked as Mason was turning out the light. Yeah, buddy? Are you happy now with the new job? Mason thought about it honestly. Yeah, I think I am. Good. You look different. Less tired. I'm probably more tired, actually. The work is harder. But different tired. Like you're tired because you did something important, not just tired because you were awake all night. Mason stood in the doorway, marveling at his 7-year-old's insight. You're pretty smart, you know that? I know. Marcus told me I know too much about dinosaurs. Is that bad? There's no such thing as knowing too much about something you love. That's what I told him. Mason smiled. Get some sleep, buddy. Love you, Dad. Love you too. The week continued. Work, pick up Noah, dinner, homework, bedtime. The rhythm was different, but sustainable. Mason found himself engaged with the work at Meridian in ways he hadn't been engaged with anything in years. Complex problems, challenging aircraft, colleagues who respected his expertise and pushed him to be better. Saturday arrived. Chocolate chip pancakes at Millie's with Noah and Serena. The 3 of them fell into easy conversation, the awkwardness from their first breakfast together long gone. Serena asked about Mason's first week at Meridian. Noah showed her the birthday invitation he'd received from Marcus. Everything felt natural and right in ways Mason hadn't expected. Afterward, in the parking lot, Serena caught Mason alone again. The Irish investigation released preliminary findings on the citation. You were right. Structural fatigue in the tail section caused by inadequate inspection intervals. The failure propagated and severed both hydraulic lines. It was maintenance negligence, not sabotage. I figured, but you should still have me inspect your entire fleet. If this happened on one aircraft, there might be systemic issues with your maintenance program. Already arranged. I'm bringing all 4 jets to Columbus next month. You can inspect them at Meridian's facility during your off hours. I'll pay your consulting rate plus equipment fees. I don't have a consulting rate. You do now. $200 per hour, non-negotiable. Mason did the math in his head. A thorough inspection of 4 aircraft could take 50 to 60 hours. That was $10,000 to $12,000 on top of his Meridian salary. More money than he'd ever made from a single project. That's too much. It's what you're worth. Take it or I'll find someone else who will. You won't find anyone better. It's Keith. Dim di out. I know. That's why I'm paying you appropriately. Serena's expression softened. Mason, stop fighting me on this. You saved 4 lives and you're helping ensure no one else dies in my aircraft. That's worth every penny. Let me pay you what you deserve. Mason wanted to argue but recognized the futility. Fine, 200 per hour. But I'm doing the inspections properly. That means taking my time and not cutting corners. I wouldn't want it any other way. They stood in the parking lot watching Noah climb on the truck's bumper, carefully not touching the mud puddles. The morning was warm, spring definitely arriving despite winter's stubborn resistance. Everything felt like transition, seasons changing, routines shifting, walls coming down that Mason had thought were permanent. Thank you, Serena said quietly, for letting me be part of this. Your Saturday mornings with Noah. It means more than you probably realize. Why does it mean so much? Because I've never had this. This simple, ordinary thing where people just enjoy each other's company without agenda or transaction. My entire life has been business deals and networking and relationships that exist because someone wants something. But Noah doesn't want anything from me. He just likes talking about dinosaurs and eating pancakes, and you let me be part of that without making it complicated. It is complicated, though, Mason said. You're a billionaire having breakfast with a mechanic and his kid. That's inherently complicated. Only if we make it complicated. What if we just let it be what it is? What is it? Serena smiled slightly. I don't know yet, but I like it. Whatever it is. Mason didn't have a response to that. He climbed into his truck where Noah waited, and they drove home through streets bright with unexpected sunshine. The future was uncertain and full of changes he was still processing. But for the first time in 3 years, uncertain didn't feel terrifying. It felt like possibility. 3 months into his new job at Meridian, Mason found himself standing in a conference room full of corporate executives who were arguing about something he'd already solved. The meeting had been going for 40 minutes, and nobody had bothered asking his opinion yet, despite the fact that he was the one who'd written the technical report they were all debating. The inspection intervals are clearly inadequate, one executive was saying. We need to double the frequency across the entire fleet. That's not financially viable, another countered. Do you understand what that would cost in downtime and labor? Do you understand what a catastrophic failure would cost in lives and liability? Mason cleared his throat. The room went silent. Karen Walsh, who'd invited him to this meeting, gestured for him to speak. The inspection intervals aren't the problem, Mason said. The problem is that we're inspecting the wrong things. We're following manufacturer recommendations that were designed for standard operations, but most of these aircraft are operating in conditions that exceed standard parameters. We need targeted inspections focused on high-stress components, not comprehensive inspections of everything. That cuts the cost by 70% while actually improving safety outcomes. The executives stared at him. One of them opened a folder and started reading Mason's report more carefully. Another pulled out a calculator and started running numbers. Walsh smiled slightly. Mr. Reed submitted a detailed proposal 3 days ago. It's on page 17 of the materials I sent you all last week. If anyone had actually read it, we could have saved ourselves 40 minutes of arguing. Mason sat back down while the executives digested this information. He'd learned quickly that corporate bureaucracy moved slower than military chains of command, and that having the right answer didn't matter if you couldn't navigate the politics of getting people to listen. But he was getting better at it, learning to translate technical expertise into language that financial people understood. After the meeting, Walsh caught him in the hallway. You're making quite an impression here. 3 months and you've already identified flaws in our entire inspection protocol that somehow went unnoticed for years. I'm just looking at the data honestly. Most people see what they expect to see. That's what makes you valuable. You see what's actually there. Walsh handed him a folder. New project. Military transport with chronic engine issues that nobody can diagnose. It's been grounded for 6 weeks. See what you can find. Mason took the folder back to his workstation, feeling the familiar satisfaction of having a complex problem to solve. This was what he'd been missing. Not just the technical challenges, but the sense that his work mattered, that people's lives depended on him getting it right. His phone buzzed. Text from Serena. Board meeting ran late. Can't make Saturday breakfast tomorrow. Dean. Rain check? Mason felt unexpected disappointment. Saturday breakfast had become the highlight of his week, not just because of Noah's enthusiasm, but because of the easy rhythm he and Serena had developed. They talked about aircraft and parenting and nothing important at all. She'd become something Mason hadn't expected, a friend. Maybe more than a friend, though neither of them had acknowledged that possibility out loud. No problem. Noah will be disappointed, but he'll survive. Next Saturday? Definitely. And I'm bringing the fleet to Meridian next Thursday for your inspections. Clear your schedule. Already done. That evening, Mason picked up Noah from the after-school program and found his son unusually quiet during the drive home. When pressed, Noah admitted he'd had a fight with Marcus about whether velociraptors or Deinonychus were better hunters. Marcus said velociraptors because of the movie, but the movie Velociraptors were actually based on Deinonychus and they got the name wrong. I told him that, and he said I was being a know-it-all. Mason navigated through traffic while considering how to respond. Were you being a know-it-all? I was being factually accurate. Those aren't mutually exclusive. You can be right and still make people feel bad about being wrong. Dar samus. Noah thought about this. But shouldn't people want to know the truth? Most people do want to know the truth, but they also want to feel respected. If you correct someone in a way that makes them feel stupid, they stop listening even if you're right. That doesn't make sense. I know, but humans aren't logical. We're emotional. How you say something matters as much as what you say. Noah was quiet for a moment. Is that why your meetings at work are so long? Because people care more about feelings than facts? Mason laughed despite himself. Yeah, buddy. That's exactly why my meetings are so long. At home, they fell into their evening routine. Dinner, homework, a new library book about space exploration. Mason was helping Noah with a math worksheet when his phone rang. Serena, which was unusual, she normally texted, "Hey, what's up?" "I need your help. Not with aircraft. With something else." Mason heard stress in her voice. "What's wrong?" "My head of operations quit today. Just walked out in the middle of a crisis because I apparently undervalue human relationships and treat people like assets instead of individuals." He's not wrong, but his timing is terrible. We've got a major product launch in 3 weeks, and half the team is on the verge of mutiny because they think I'm a heartless corporate machine. Are you a heartless corporate machine? Probably. I don't know. Maybe. Mason, I built this company by being ruthless and not caring what people thought of me, but it's starting to feel hollow, like I'm winning at a game that doesn't actually matter. Why are you telling me this? Because you're the only person I know who doesn't want anything from me. You'll tell me the truth instead of what you think I want to hear. Mason glanced at Noah, who was watching him with curious eyes. Hold on a second. He muted the phone. Buddy, can you finish your math worksheet while I take this call? I'll check it when I'm done. Noah nodded and returned to his homework. Mason stepped into the kitchen where he could talk privately. Okay, you want the truth? Here it is. You are ruthless. You do treat people like assets sometimes, but you're also capable of genuine connection when you let yourself. You eat pancakes with a 7-year-old and listen to him talk about dinosaurs. You show up to breakfast even when you're exhausted from board meetings. You care about whether your aircraft are safe, not just because of liability, but because you don't want people to die. That's not a heartless machine. That's someone who's afraid to be vulnerable. I'm not afraid of vulnerability. Yes, you are. You're terrified of it. You've built walls so high around yourself that most people can't get close enough to see the actual human being underneath all the corporate armor. There was a long silence. Mason wondered if he'd gone too far. Then Serena's voice came through, quieter than before. How do I fix it? You start by admitting you don't have all the answers. You tell your team that you know you've been difficult to work with and you're trying to do better. You ask them what they need instead of assuming you know. And you accept that sometimes being a good leader means being imperfect in front of people. That sounds terrifying. It is terrifying. But it's also the only way to build something real instead of just building something successful. Sulkins. Another pause. When did you get so wise? Regards a shitskis. I'm not wise. I'm just a guy who spent 3 years hiding from life and recently realized that safety and stagnation are basically the same thing. Okay, I'll try. Tomorrow I'll talk to my team and attempt to be a human being instead of a CEO. Good. And Serena, the fact that you called me asking for help means you're already less of a heartless machine than you think. After they hung up, Mason returned to find Noah had finished his math worksheet correctly. They did bedtime routine, and Mason found himself thinking about his conversation with Serena, about walls and vulnerability and the ways people protected themselves from connection because connection meant risk. He'd built his own walls after Julia left, had convinced himself that being Noah's father was enough, that he didn't need anything else. But Serena had walked into his life and pointed out that limiting yourself wasn't the same as protecting yourself, that sometimes the safest choice was actually the most dangerous one. Thursday afternoon, Serena's 4 aircraft arrived at Meridian's facility. Mason spent the next 2 days conducting the most thorough inspections of his career. He found 3 minor issues across the fleet, nothing catastrophic, but problems that would have become catastrophic if left unaddressed. By Saturday morning, he had comprehensive reports ready for all 4 aircraft. But Saturday was also breakfast day. Mason debated skipping it to finish final documentation, but Noah had been excited all week about Serena coming back. So at 6:30, father and son climbed into the truck and drove to Millie's through streets still quiet with early morning. Serena's Tesla was in the parking lot. Inside, she sat in their usual booth, looking different somehow. Less polished, more approachable. Her hair was down and she wore jeans and a sweatshirt that looked comfortable rather than expensive. "Good morning," she said when Noah scrambled in beside her. "I missed you guys last week." "We missed you too," Noah said. "Dad was grumpy all day Saturday." "I wasn't grumpy." "You were a little grumpy." Serena smiled. "I appreciate the honesty. How's Marcus? Did you two work out your dinosaur disagreement?" Yeah, I apologized for being a know-it-all, and he apologized for saying velociraptors were better than Deinonychus, when everyone knows Deinonychus were superior predators. "Everyone knows that," Mason agreed solemnly. They ordered breakfast. The usual chocolate chip pancakes for Noah and Serena, eggs and toast for Mason. The conversation flowed easily. Noah's school project, Mason's work at Meridian, Serena's attempt to be more human with her employees. "How did that go?" Mason asked. "The talk with your team?" "Better than expected. I admitted I've been difficult and asked what they needed to feel valued. Turns out mostly they just wanted to be asked. One guy started crying because apparently nobody had ever solicited his opinion before. It was uncomfortable and awkward, and probably the most productive meeting I've had in years." "Good. That's progress." "I also promoted someone to replace my operations head, a woman who's been with the company for 8 years and who apparently everyone loves. I had no idea she existed before this week because I never bothered learning anyone's name below director level." "You're learning." "I'm trying. It's harder than building a company. People are complicated." Noah, who'd been listening while consuming pancakes, looked up suddenly. "Serena, do you like my dad?" "Oh." The question hung in the air. Mason froze with his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. Serena's eyes went wide. "Of course I like your dad. He's very smart and good at his job." "No, I mean, do you like him? Like the way grown-ups like each other when they want to be more than friends?" Mason set down his coffee carefully. "Buddy, that's not really an appropriate question." "Why not? You're always telling me I should be honest and ask questions instead of making assumptions." "Yes, but it's okay," Serena interrupted. She looked at Noah seriously. "That's a fair question, and I'm going to give you an honest answer. I do like your dad, more than friends. But relationships are complicated, especially when kids are involved. So we're taking things slowly and figuring out what makes sense." Noah considered this. "Okay, I think you should be more than friends. Dad's happier when you're around, and you laugh more when you're with us than you probably do at work. That means you're good for each other." Mason stared at his 7-year-old son, who'd apparently become a relationship counselor. "When did you get so perceptive?" "I pay attention. You taught me that." The rest of breakfast passed in slightly awkward silence. After they paid, Mason winning the usual argument about who covered the check, they walked to the parking lot together. Noah ran ahead to the truck, apparently satisfied that he'd accomplished whatever goal he'd had with his interrogation. "I'm sorry about that," Mason said. "He's been asking questions lately about whether I'm going to date anyone. I should have prepared him better before he ambushed you." "Oh, ich besommets." "He didn't ambush me. He asked a question I've been avoiding asking myself." Serena leaned against her Tesla, the morning sun warm on her face. "He's right, you know. I am happier when I'm with you two. These Saturday mornings are the only time all week when I feel like a normal person instead of a CEO. We're happy when you're around too, both of us." "So what do we do about that?" Mason thought about walls and vulnerability and the risk of letting someone close. Thought about Julia leaving and the years he'd spent protecting himself and Noah from that kind of pain. Thought about Serena pushing him to be better and challenging him to stop hiding and showing up every Saturday morning because she actually cared. "We keep doing what we're doing," Mason said. "Saturday breakfasts, honest conversations, letting Noah educate us about dinosaurs. And maybe we acknowledge that somewhere along the way this became something more than just acquaintances sharing pancakes." "What did it become?" "I don't know yet, but I'm willing to find out if you are." Serena smiled, genuine warmth breaking through her usual careful control. "Yeah, I'm willing to find out," said. They didn't kiss, didn't make dramatic declarations, just stood in the parking lot of a cheap diner acknowledging that something had shifted between them, that walls were coming down and possibilities were opening up, and maybe taking risks was worth it when the alternative was staying safe and lonely. Over the next month, things evolved naturally. Serena started coming to Saturday breakfast and staying for the library trip afterward. She joined them for dinner one evening, helping Noah with a school project about the solar system while Mason cooked. She texted Mason throughout the week, sometimes about work, sometimes about nothing important, sometimes just to share something funny Noah had said the previous Saturday. Mason's work at Meridian continued to go well. He was promoted to lead inspector after 6 months, given responsibility for the facility's most complex diagnostics. The consulting work for Serena's company expanded. She hired him to evaluate her entire maintenance program and recommend systemic changes. The money was good, but that wasn't the point anymore. The point was doing work that mattered and feeling challenged and using the skills he'd spent years pretending didn't exist. Noah thrived in the after-school program, making friends and joining activities Mason hadn't been able to provide when working nights. His grades improved. His confidence grew. He still drew pictures of families sometimes, but now they included 3 figures instead of 2, and the woman had dark hair instead of blonde. One evening, in late spring, after Noah had fallen asleep beneath his glow-in-the-dark stars, Mason found Serena sitting on his front porch. They'd progressed to her visiting the house occasionally, though she was always careful to leave before it got late. Maintaining appropriate boundaries, she'd said, making sure Noah didn't get confused about their relationship status. "What are you doing out here?" Mason asked, settling onto the porch step beside her. "Thinking about how my life has changed in 6 months. About how I almost died in an aircraft with a structural crack, and the mechanic who saved me ended up saving me in other ways too. I didn't save you. I just pointed out that you were capable of more than corporate ruthlessness." That's a form of saving. I was so empty before I met you and Noah. I had money and power and success, and absolutely nothing that actually mattered. Now I have Saturday mornings at a terrible diner and conversations about dinosaurs, and someone who challenges me to be better. That's everything I didn't know I needed. Mason took her hand, the gesture still new enough to feel significant. You did the same for me. I was hiding, pretending that settling for less was the same as being content. You pushed me to take risks and do work that fulfilled me and stop protecting Noah from change that was actually good for both of us. We saved each other then. Miki... Maybe. Or maybe we just both needed someone to be honest with us about who we were versus who we could be. They sat in comfortable silence, watching fireflies begin their evening dance across the yard. Mason's truck still made that rattling sound he kept meaning to fix. The porch still needed painting. The yard still needed more work than he had time to give it, but everything felt different now. Not perfect, not magically solved, just different in ways that mattered. I need to tell you something, Serena said eventually. My company is expanding operations to the West Coast. I'll be spending 2 weeks per month in California for the next year. Board won't budge on that requirement. Mason felt his stomach drop. Okay, touch. But I don't want to lose this. Us. Whatever we're building. So I'm proposing something. She turned to face him. Come with me. You and Noah. Meridian has a facility in Los Angeles. I already talked to Karen Walsh, and they'd love to have you there. Same position, same pay, better weather. Noah could go to great schools. We could actually see where this relationship goes instead of trying to maintain it across half the country. You want us to move to California? I want us to take the next step. Together. Not just Saturday breakfasts and occasional dinners, but actually building something real. I know it's a big ask. I know you've worked hard to create stability for Noah, but sometimes stability means growing together instead of staying in place. Mason thought about it. About Los Angeles and new schools and disrupting everything they'd built. About the risk of betting his and Noah's future on a relationship that was still relatively new. About all the ways it could go wrong. But he also thought about the ways it could go right. About building a life with someone who challenged him and made him better. About showing Noah that taking chances for the right reasons was worth the fear. About the fact that staying still was its own kind of risk. I need to talk to Noah, Mason said. This affects him as much as me. If he's not okay with it, we're not doing it. Fair enough. The next morning, Mason sat down with his son at the kitchen table before breakfast. Buddy, I need to talk to you about something important. Noah set down his dinosaur book, immediately serious. Is someone dying? No, nothing like that. Serena has to spend a lot of time in California for work. She asked if we'd consider moving there too. There's a job for me in Los Angeles. Good schools for you. And it would mean we could see her more than just Saturdays. Would we still have Saturday breakfasts? Yeah, just a different diner. Would I have to leave my friends? You'd leave your friends here, but you'd make new friends there. That's what happens when you move. Noah thought about this carefully, his 7-year-old brain working through complexities that would have been easier if Mason could just make the decision for him. But Mason had learned that Noah deserved honesty and agency in decisions that affected his life. Do you want to move? Noah asked. I want to be with Serena. She makes me happy. But I also want you to be happy. And if moving would make you unhappy, we're not doing it. Do you love her? The question was direct and unexpected. Mason thought about how to answer honestly. I think I'm starting to. Yeah. Does she love you? I think so. Does she love me? I know she does. She tells me all the time how much she enjoys spending time with you. Noah nodded slowly. Then we should move, because you've been alone since Mom left and you deserve to have someone who loves you. And I like Serena. She's nice, and she listens when I talk about dinosaurs, and she makes you smile more. That's enough reason. Mason felt his throat tighten. You're sure? I'm sure, but Dad, can we bring the glow-in-the-dark stars? I don't want to sleep without them. Yeah, buddy. We can bring the stars. They told Serena that afternoon. Her face lit up with something Mason had rarely seen, pure, unguarded joy. Plans were made quickly. Meridian, LA was thrilled to have Mason. Serena found a house for them. Not mansion, just a comfortable place in a good school district where Noah could have a yard and Mason could have a workshop. She insisted on covering the moving costs, which Mason argued about briefly before accepting that some battles weren't worth fighting. The move happened in July. Mason's last day at Meridian, Ohio was bittersweet. Handshakes and well wishes and promises to stay in touch. Martha cried when they said goodbye, making Mason promise to call regularly and send pictures. Noah's friends threw him a goodbye party at the park, 7-year-olds running around eating cake and pretending they weren't sad about losing a friend. California was different, brighter, warmer, faster paced. The new house was bigger than anything Mason had lived in before. Noah's school was impressive and slightly intimidating. Mason's new colleagues at Meridian, LA were welcoming, but it took time to build the rapport he'd had in Ohio. But Serena was there. Not just on Saturdays, but Tuesday dinners and Thursday movie nights and weekend trips to the beach. She integrated into their lives gradually, carefully. respecting boundaries while slowly becoming part of the family. She learned to make Noah's favorite mac and cheese. She helped with homework. She sat through long explanations of prehistoric marine life with genuine interest. One evening in September, after Noah had gone to bed in his new room beneath relocated glow-in-the-dark stars, Mason and Serena sat on the back porch watching the sunset over unfamiliar California landscape. "Are you happy?" Serena asked. "Really happy. Not just making the best of it?" Well, so Mason considered the question honestly. "Yeah, I'm happy. It's different and sometimes I miss Ohio, but this feels right. Us together, building something real instead of just keeping things safe and separate." Yes. Mal, I'm happy too. Happier than I've ever been. My company is doing well, but that's not the important part anymore. The important part is coming home to you and Noah, having dinner together, helping with homework, the ordinary things that used to seem so foreign to me. You're good at the ordinary things, better than you give yourself credit for. I'm learning. You're patient with me when I mess up. You're patient with me too. This hasn't been easy blending our lives together. We've had arguments and disagreements and moments where I wasn't sure we'd make it. But we did make it. We did. They sat in comfortable silence, the California evening warm around them. Mason thought about the journey that had brought him here. From the night he'd found a crack in a Gulf Stream to this moment on a porch 3,000 miles from where he'd started. About how saying yes to one thing had opened doors to everything else. About how the person he'd been 6 months ago, careful, contained, settling for good enough, had transformed into someone willing to take risks for the right reasons. 6 months later, on a cold Saturday morning in February, Mason and Serena and Noah sat in a diner in Los Angeles that served terrible coffee and decent pancakes. Their new Saturday tradition. Noah was explaining something about Mesozoic marine reptiles, while Serena listened with the kind of focused attention that still surprised Mason sometimes. Did you know that Mosasaurus could grow up to 50 feet long? They were basically underwater dinosaurs, except they weren't actually dinosaurs. They were marine reptiles. People always get that confused. "I did not know that," Serena said. "That's terrifying and amazing, right? Imagine swimming in the ocean and seeing one of those." Mason watched them together, his son and the woman who'd somehow become essential to both their lives, and felt something click into place. This was family. Not the family he'd planned or expected, but the family they'd built together through honesty and risk and willingness to be imperfect in front of each other. Later that day, after Noah had gone to a friend's birthday party, Mason and Serena walked along the beach near their house. The Pacific Ocean stretched gray and endless under overcast skies. They walked hand in hand, not talking, just being present together. "I've been thinking," Serena said eventually, "about what comes next for us." "What comes next?" "Well, I don't know exactly, but I know I want you and Noah in my life permanently. I know I want to keep building this thing we've created. I know I don't want to imagine a future that doesn't include both of you." Mason stopped walking, turning to face her. "Are you asking what I think you're asking? I'm saying I love you, both of you. And I want to make this official. Not rushing, not right away, but soon. When it feels right. When Noah's ready. When we're all ready." "I love you too, and Noah loves you, which matters as much as anything else." "So we're doing this? Actually doing this?" "Yeah, we're doing this." They stood on the beach watching waves crash against sand, two people who'd found each other through cracked aircraft and honest conversations and willingness to let walls come down. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would still be arguments and difficulties and moments of doubt. Serena would still struggle with vulnerability sometimes. Mason would still fight his instinct to protect Noah from every possible risk. Noah would still have bad days and nightmares about thunderstorms and questions about the mother who'd left. But they would face all of it together. That was the point. Not perfection, but partnership. Not safety, but honesty. Not hiding from life, but engaging with it fully despite the fear. 6 months later, they found a bigger house with room for all of them, and space for Martha to visit from Ohio. A year after that, Serena officially adopted Noah, who'd asked if she could be his mom for real instead of just feeling like his mom. 2 years after that, they were still having Saturday breakfast together. Chocolate chip pancakes for Noah and Serena, eggs and toast for Mason, terrible coffee for everyone. Some mornings, Noah still drew pictures of families, but now the families were complete. 3 figures holding hands, standing in front of a house with a yard and glow-in-the-dark stars visible through a window. And sometimes, in the corner of these drawings, he'd sketch a small airplane flying overhead, a reminder of where they'd all started, a reminder that sometimes the biggest changes in life begin with the smallest cracks. Mason had learned that protecting the people you love doesn't mean keeping them safe from change. It means having the courage to let life evolve naturally, trusting that the foundation you've built together is strong enough to handle transformation. Serena had learned that success without connection is just expensive loneliness, and that the most valuable things in life are the ones that can't be measured in quarterly reports or stock prices. And Noah, wise beyond his years, had learned that families come in all configurations, and that sometimes the best parents are the ones who choose you rather than the ones you're born to. They weren't perfect. Their life wasn't smooth or always easy, but it was real and honest and built on mutual respect and willingness to grow together. And on Saturday mornings, eating pancakes at a diner where nobody knew Serena was a billionaire and everyone treated them like any other family. They had everything that actually mattered. The story of how a single-father mechanic saved a billionaire's life and ended up saving his own in the process wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic transformations. It was about small choices made consistently over time, about showing up even when it was uncomfortable, about asking hard questions and giving honest answers, about taking risks not because you were fearless, but because staying frozen in place was scarier than moving forward. And sometimes, late at night, when Mason checked on Noah sleeping beneath those relocated glow-in-the-dark stars, he thought about the crack he'd found in that Gulf Stream, how easy it would have been to miss, how catastrophic the consequences if he'd looked away, how one moment of paying attention when others had been careless had changed everything. Life was like that, he'd learned, full of hairline fractures waiting to either destroy you or redirect you toward something better. The difference was whether you had the courage to actually look at them instead of pretending they didn't exist. Whether you were willing to do the hard work of repair instead of just papering over the damage and hoping it would hold. He'd looked. He'd done the work. And standing in his son's doorway, watching him sleep peacefully in a house full of people who loved him, Mason knew he'd made the right choice. Not the safe choice, not the easy choice, but the right one. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.